I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything, I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, happy Bank Holiday Monday. It's Patrick Christys here on GB News. Here's what I've got in this action-packed hour. 400,000 illegal migrants trying to make their way through Europe and get to Britain. Our immigration minister is abroad today trying to see what he can do to stop that invasion. And another day of shocking revelations in the Philip Schofield scandal. I want to know who knew what when and what now for Philip. Moving on, we're also going to be talking about this. Are you safe on the streets of Britain? As our woke police force desperately tried to get to grips with the crime crisis, apparently 80 muggings a day go unsolved. They're not even investigating. They're too busy escorting Just Stop Oil. Talking of which, we are, of course, going to be talking about this. Labour are the latest party to adopt Just Stop Oil's policies. So if you vote Labour, do you get Just Stop Oil? I will be talking to a Labour Party grandee about the implications of all of this. And finally, we are very nearly at our target, people, OK? I am desperately trying to raise £50,000 for the mental health charity Mind. I will be getting my kits off and dancing on stage with the Dream Boys. And we are just 1,200 quid away, thanks to you wonderful people, from hitting that target. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. And you lucky people, I will be reintroducing you to the old me, Patrick Christys, a little bit later on in the show. See you in a tick. Get those emails flooding in, gbviews@gbnews.com. Do you feel like we are on the edge of an invasion when it comes to the latest wave of illegal migrants trying to make it into Britain? And what's your take on this Philip Schofield scandal? gbviews@gbnews.com. Now, though, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon. It is 2 minutes past 3. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. ITV is in crisis talks following the scandal surrounding Philip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague. That's according to GB News sources. The car dealer Arnold Clark, the programme's main sponsor, has announced it won't renew its contract this autumn, and GB News understands the ongoing scandal could cost the broadcaster tens of millions of pounds in lost advertising revenue. Schofield has rejected claims there was a toxic culture. At This Morning, in a statement released shortly before the show went to air, he said it's the same handful of people with a grudge against me or the show who seem to have the loudest voice. Well, in response, GB News presenter and former This Morning host Eamon Holmes said this: Schofield has just put out a delusional statement. Like Holly, he puts it on Insta stories, so if it goes wrong, there's no record after 24 hours. I'm reluctant to give the liar any more publicity, but believe me, Pip, if you're looking for a fight, you've picked the wrong person. 7 men have been remanded in custody after being charged with the attempted murder of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell in County Tyrone. Caldwell was shot several times at a sports centre in Omagh in February. All 7 men will appear before Omagh Magistrates Court via video link on the 27th of June. 2 of those men were also charged for being members of the IRA, with 3 of them charged with the preparation of terrorist acts. British police will help to crack down on people smuggling gangs in an attempt to stop migrants leaving North Africa. Officers from the National Crime Agency will work alongside authorities in Tunisia and Algeria. The Italian government predicts up to 400,000 people will try to reach Europe via the Mediterranean Sea this summer. That's 4 times as many as last year. Former Conservative advisor Claire Pearsall says it's the right course of action.
Is completely correct that we start looking at where people are coming from, where the conflict zones are, and working with those countries to ensure that they don't come through to mainland Europe and make their way across and then into the Channel. And it takes an international community to stop these things, which is now what we're starting to see.
Met Police will stop attending most mental health emergency calls so officers can focus on crime. The Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, has written to Health and Social Care Services to say from September, police won't respond to those calls unless there's a threat to life. The aim is to give police more time to focus on fulfilling their core roles. The father of an aspiring Royal Marine who was killed by an asylum seeker has spoken exclusively to GB News. A number of Home Office errors left an Afghan double murderer free to kill Royal Marine Tommy Roberts, as revealed in the Mail on Sunday. Roberts was fatally stabbed by Lawangeen Abdul Rahimzai while trying to stop a fight over an electric scooter in Bournemouth. Abdul Rahimzai, who entered the UK posing as a child, was sentenced to life in prison. Tommy's father, Peter, told Dan Wootton it shouldn't have been allowed to happen.
The fact he shouldn't have even been in the country anyway, do you feel let down by the system?
Very, very let down. No one checked him out. And even though the foster parent has insisted and given him lots of times, he'd been caught with a knife and she'd taken it away from him. But nothing was done with the social workers, with the immigration, with the police, with anyone. No one actually asked the question, let's check this guy out. He seems really bad. There's a lot of bad reports about him. Let's just make the phone call and check him out.
And you can watch the full interview this evening on Dan Wootton Tonight at 9 o'clock. Now, the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, has come under a renewed wave of Russian missile and drone attacks. School children were forced to take cover in the second attack of the day, as it unusually took place in the daytime and targeted the city centre. Kyiv was also targeted early this morning. Authorities say air defences intercepted all missiles and drones. On Sunday, Russia launched its biggest attack on the capital since the start of the invasion. Ukraine has indicated it will launch a counter-offensive imminently. And the Canadian city of Halifax has declared a state of emergency as wildfires continue to cause havoc in the region. This dashcam footage shows a car speeding along a road in Nova Scotia in the east of the country, surrounded by flames, narrowly avoiding a collision with another vehicle. The fires have caused evacuations and power outages. Earlier this month, the western province of Alberta also declared a state of emergency after wildfires forced tens of thousands of people from their homes. This is GB News. More as it happens. And now it's over to Patrick.
When Suella Braverman said hundreds of millions of people were going to make their way to Britain, she was called all sorts of names. When she said that there was an invasion taking place on our south coast, she was called a far-right racist. But just look at what's happening now. 400,000 migrants are predicted to try to enter Italy this year from Africa. The vast majority of these people will not be staying in Italy or in Spain or in France. Why? Because they want to come to Britain. And European nations are more than happy to just wave them through. The myth that these people are all desperate refugees has been completely shattered by the latest immigration figures, which show nearly 1 million people coming from non-EU countries, many of whom came from Africa. If you really want to get here legally, it clearly isn't that hard. The majority of these people will be economic migrants who do not meet our economic test to entry. We are not a charity case. We have rules for entry, like everywhere does. You have to be 18 to buy a packet of cigarettes. You have to be a certain height to ride a roller coaster. You have to be under the alcohol limit to drive a car. Rules are normal, OK? They lead to a stable, functional society. Well, our immigration minister, Robert Jenrick, is currently off to Algeria and Tunisia to get a good look at the situation on the ground there as hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people prepare to descend on Europe and try to get across the Channel then into Britain. We have to crack those gangs and cut them off at source. We have to deport thousands of people a month as a deterrent. People moaning about the cost of deportation should consider the cost of not doing it. Continued record illegal immigration by economic migrants who will not benefit our economy massively. If they could be a net benefit, then they would gain entry legally. I am convinced that Britain is at a crossroads now. We could crack the gangs and stave off hundreds of thousands of people trying to get to Britain this year and deport people as a deterrent, or we can wave goodbye to our way of life, our culture and our infrastructure. Well, that's what I think. Anyway, I want to hear from you, of course. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. Lots of immigration news in town today. Supposedly, quite a few Albanian criminals have absconded. We've got our immigration minister abroad, desperately trying to get a closer look at the situation and trying to crack down on those people smuggling gangs. But we also do have a deep dive later on in this show into exactly how on earth we can, if at all, keep track of people who overstay their visas. That's what I really want to know, because I am unconvinced that those net migration figures tell the full story. But for more on what's happening today with our immigration minister, I'm going to go now to our political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very, very much. So he's gone abroad. He wants to have a closer look at cutting the head off the snake and getting to grips with these people smuggling gangs. Is that right?
Yes, the government is very keen to point to all the things that they say that they are doing to try to stop the boats. Of course, huge numbers of people crossing the Channel last year, about 7,500 have already come this year. So the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, is going to North Africa. He's going to be visiting Algeria, Tunisia, then he's going on to Italy. He'll be meeting with the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni, and then finishing up in France at the end of the week, looking at Calais and how this £480 million that we're giving the French over the next 3 years is being spent. So the idea is that international cooperation is absolutely critical to try to stem the flow of people coming up and trying to get into Europe, and then obviously a good chunk of them coming across to Britain. Italy are very worried. They think about 400,000 may enter Italy this year. So Robert Jenrick is saying that the National Crime Agency, police officers will be working in North Africa alongside people there, trying to identify and then break down some of these smuggling gangs, because of course much better, much cheaper, much better for all concerned if you can stop this at source, stop these people arriving in Italy, stop stop these people then potentially progressing across Europe to France, Germany, wherever, potentially to the Channel and on to us. The government is also launching adverts this week on social media in Albania, basically saying if you come to the UK illegally, you will be detained and removed, saying forget it. If you come, you're going to be sent back, so don't even think about it. They're also trying to crack down on these many social media posts put up by the smuggling gangs saying, you know, offering safe passage, cheap passage, pressing on the social media companies to crack down and remove those adverts. And then, of course, there's the illegal migration bill going through Parliament, currently in the House of Lords, and also the court challenge to flights to Rwanda, which the government is hoping to win in the next week or so. And they're hoping that potentially they might eventually be able to put people on flights to Rwanda later this year.
And this is the illegal side of things, which we are, of course, very keen on. We're also keen on the legal side of things. I will be zoning in on this specifically when it comes to people who are overstaying and how on earth we are keeping tabs on those, because I think it makes a mockery, potentially, of the actual official numbers that we have been getting. But Rishi Sunak now clearly desperately trying to shift that conversation back onto the illegal side and trying to say, look, here's some international cooperation. It's in all of our interests, mainland Europe, to try to get this sorted. I mean, the only question I've got there is why on earth hasn't this happened much sooner? But Sunak now desperate to drag us back to the illegal side of things.
Yes, he really is. I mean, stopping the boats is a very tough ask, and I think it's clear to everybody that despite all of these measures, the government is not going to stop the boats by the time of the next election, but it might possibly bring numbers down significantly. And I think, as you say, Patrick, part of all this is a bit of a distraction, really, because in some ways the government wants us to be talking illegal migration and what they are doing, rather than focusing, as we did, of course, late last week, on the levels of net migration, which are now at an all-time high of 606,000, despite 13 years of Conservative prime ministers saying that they would get those numbers down. And getting those numbers down is much tougher because, of course, there's all sorts of factors behind it, including the fact that many government departments are actually very happy with the levels of migration, because the health department, the education department, plugging the worker shortages, it's helpful to them, and they don't really want those numbers to come down. But of course, it is placing huge pressures on our public services and indeed on the huge housing crisis that we already have.
Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster, our political reporter outside Westminster. I'm going to be hitting up a few different angles on this. Our Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, is abroad at the moment visiting Tunisia and Algeria because supposedly that is where around 400,000 people are getting ready to enter Italy and then obviously off through Europe. And it's reasonable to expect that the vast majority of them want to come here. May I just remind you of some of the numbers at play more broadly here? The Archbishop of Canterbury himself came out and said that there could be as many as 80 million people displaced by 2050. So if those people are coming here, is that not something that we should want to stop? So we're going to be focusing on what's happening abroad. Where is our money also going to the French? Interesting that he's going to go and have a look around there, isn't he, Robert Jenrick, and see what's happening in Calais. But closer to home, throughout the course of this show, I'm going to be drilling down a little bit deeper into what happens when somebody overstays. And this is all born out of what I frankly saw with my own eyes when I went up to visit Boston in Lincolnshire last week for our Net Migration special. It is patently obvious that there are people hanging around in the streets all day there, drinking, smoking drugs, who are not supposed to be here. Maybe they were supposed to be here initially, but have clearly overstayed. And how are we getting to grips with these people? Because as far as I can see, it's an almost impossible task, but it is one I think that makes a mockery of our net migration figures. I also want to bring your attention to two other migration stories that I'm going to be talking about as well. Supposedly, Albanian criminals have been absconding around the United Kingdom. It's all very well and good, is it not, talking about cracking criminal gangs abroad. What about the ones that we already have right here at home? And get a load of this. Rent rises, apparently, could be driven up by as much as 8% as a result of net migration. Can I also just caveat this by talking about the illegal side of things? Because when people are coming across the channel and we're putting them in hotels, all too often then we are putting them in social housing. This is on top of Ukrainian refugees, Afghan refugees and Hong Kong refugees, asylum seekers, whatever you want to call them as well. And we are not building houses. And now a new report from Capital Economics has come out and said that rental prices in this country could go up by as much as 8% as a result of net migration. So when you look at all of that in the round, is it not absolutely vital that we need to get to grips with this? I'm just going to go into the inbox very, very quickly here. Patrick, you are so right. Thank you very much. Angie, we are being invaded, Angie says. Our culture and way of life is being destroyed, so please keep talking about it. Well, I will keep banging this drum because I do seriously think that we actually have massive issues here and also issues about public safety, OK? And this is something that I know that Dan Wootton, who will be on your screens tonight, 9 o'clock to 11 p.m, is also incredibly focused upon. And he has got an exclusive interview with the father of a man who was sadly killed as a result of our ridiculous policy when it comes to what's going on in the channel. So we've got a lot to go at here. Housing, absconders, what a soft touch we are, the foreign gangs, and also public safety. GB Views at GBNews.com. And do go to our website, gbnews.com, where you will find the best analysis and opinion, as well as all of the latest breaking news. But we're moving away from migration for now, because this morning returned to our screens today. But is it about to be scrapped after the Philip Schofield scandal? I've got to be honest with you, that's not the story for me, and it never has been. I could not care less whether or not This Morning is presented by two pigs in a ribbon if the show continues to exist. The story is this. Who knew what when about Philip Schofield, and how deep does this scandal go? That's what I want to know, and that's what I'm going to be talking about. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Deebs & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. In just a few moments, I will be telling you all about the activists who are calling for transgender children to carry guns. Yes, seriously. I mean, the mind boggles, doesn't it? But talk about something else that boggles the mind slightly. The latest on the Philip Schofield scandal. Eamon Holmes, our very own, says the disgraced TV presenter is delusional. Schofield has denied claims that there was a toxic culture out this morning. To be honest with you, I think that's the least of his worries, isn't it? But here's how today's show covered the story.
Starting today with Giles and Sonia on The Morning View. Now, we all know we happen to be in the news at the moment, and of course we appreciate that, but just from both of us and the whole team here, the crew, the guys downstairs, we love making this show for all of you.
Yeah, we really do, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to continue to do that. So let's go on with our first news story. Giles.
We are very...
Yeah, well, there we go. Well, you know, you can just hear the bellows of everyone who's ever worked in TV or radio, anyone who's an agent saying, Philip, just lay low for a while. Just shut up. Just don't say anything and hope it all goes away. Well, Schofield decided to dismiss claims by Dr. Ranj Singh that there was a toxic culture at the show. Dr. Singh said he raised concerns about what he called bullying and discrimination 2 years ago. So naturally, Philip pipes up on Instagram. Now I no longer work on This Morning, I am free to say this. I hope you have noticed that it's the same handful of people with a grudge against me or the show who seem to have the loudest voice. This Morning is the best show to work on, with the best people. In all the years I worked there was no toxicity. Do you believe him? Schofield's comments cut no ice with Eamon Holmes, who wrote on Twitter, Schofield has just put out a delusional statement. Like Holly, he puts it on Insta Story, so if it goes wrong, there is no record after 24 hours. I'm reluctant to give the liar any more publicity. But believe me, Pip, if you are looking for a fight, you have picked on the wrong person. Well, that is this summer's charity boxing match sorted, isn't it? So we can all breathe a sigh of relief there. With me now is the media commentator Nigel Pawley. Nigel, thank you very much. Can I just set my stall out here? I don't give two hoots whether or not This Morning survives. I don't care if it's presented by two pigs wearing a ribbon. I don't care whether it exists at all. The big story for me is this. In light of the alleged timeline of events in terms of Philip Schofield allegedly and reportedly, widespread reportedly, meeting this particular chap from the age of around 15, it would appear helping him with his career somewhat, and then that relationship transcending into the realms of the sexual at some point, is that an abuse of power?
That is what ITV alleged to have investigated and found there wasn't a problem. However, the question is now how clearly and how much in depth did they look into this relationship. I mean, it's quite interesting that Philip, or Pip, if you remember, was the star of Great Expectations, and Philip's career was gone in 16 days. This looks like it's going to go on a lot longer for ITV and its shareholders. He says there's no toxicity in the programme. ITV have family values. They have their own core values, and they're very strict about those core values. And at the moment, those core values are being blown out of the water day after day, hour after hour. He said there's no toxicity. This is a man who had an affair with a much younger man. He then used lawyers and IPSO, the press regulator, to try and stop the press telling the truth. He then lied about this to his family, his friends, his colleagues, his lawyers, his agents, and his bosses. So I would suggest that there's a lack of self-awareness there. And if I was advising him, and I'm available to do so, Phil, if you need anyone, I would have kept quiet about this, because people like Eamon Holmes, he has nothing to prove. He doesn't need to go back to This Morning, and they're telling the truth. But, you know, I would suggest that ITV have got a huge problem here now, because advertisers are starting getting very, very squeaky bummed, if you like, to use a football parlance, because they have core values. The people who advertise, they pay to advertise on a family show that is allegedly all friendly. Everyone's cuddly and fluffy and nice. And at the moment, it's like some sort of horrendous second-rate EastEnders or Coronation Street, and it was like a soap with the things that are going on. But worse than that, there are shareholders, And tomorrow when the markets open, it's not the ratings falling that's going to be a problem for ITV, it's the share price. And a lot of people will be looking at the share price of ITV to see how much this has damaged the brand of ITV itself. And that is a lot more serious than what started out as two TV presenters who just didn't get on. And no one could work out why. And all these weeks later, 16 days, 20 days later, we still feel that we haven't really been told the whole truth about what really went on.
But Nigel, for me, it's quite straightforward. If you or I had got a young teenager in on work experience somewhere, say, hypothetically, and then appeared to devote an extraordinary amount of time to them, including mentoring, and this is exactly the question. Where is the line between mentoring and potentially grooming?
Well, that is an issue, and I think you'll find in most professions, whether it's in the services, the police, and local government or wherever, there is a very strict line, and in business, there's a very strict line between senior people having relationships with people below them. And the fact that this relationship went on, they must have wondered when they sat on when the person concerned sat on the settee between Holly and Phil. Surely people watching that, and all the executives, the people who run daytime, the people who run the show, must have questioned why that particular runner was sitting there, why that particular runner was being given quite so much help, and then suddenly why that particular runner was dropped like a stone and allegedly promoted and moved to Loose Women.
Yeah.
Now, to do that means that the senior management who make those... Philip Schofield, although he had the power to hire and fire and allegedly didn't want Amanda Holden, didn't like Eamon Holmes, did like Holly, he doesn't hire and fire runners. That's management above him. Now,
Well,
if they actually...
This is the thing.
If they actually decided
Nigel,
to
because I want one
protect
more with
their
you.
star... So,
I just want to cut across. So I want one more with you. Sorry, and we're running out of time a bit. And that's the really important point for me, because it's not really a legal question. It's a moral question in that. Just lastly from you, Nigel, who knew what when is the other big question for me, and whether or not, frankly, it's not just Philip's career that's over now, whether or not there's people higher up the chain there who are thinking, flipping heck, we covered for this guy and now we're implicated.
I think there's at least a couple of executives who will be worrying, and I think there are going to be heads rolling over this. I think when they re-look at this, the people at the very top of ITV, when they get the effects of the share price, when they get the effects of advertisers, they're going to have to say, if they rebrand this show, if it ever comes back, they've got to clean the stable, as someone once said, and they have really got to rebrand and detoxify this programme. And to do that, I think it needs not just a change of presenter, it needs a change of management, and it needs a change of the people overseeing the daytime and the programmes in general during that period. So I think there's a couple of executives at least who will be nervously awaiting what people above them decide at ITV.
Nigel, thank you very much, as ever. Great stuff. Nigel Pawley there, media commentator, former Fleet Street showbiz guru as well. Loads more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. There is a remarkable story of the activists who were calling for trans kids to carry guns. I have copped it in the past for talking about what I term, anyway, the trans mafia. And yet here we are, talking about some of them calling for kids to carry guns. And find out why the Met Police is being criticised after a big policy change. Do you feel safe on the streets? Because also, whilst they're busy changing policies, apparently, they're not solving muggings. Do you feel safe on the streets? I've got all of this coming your way. Oh, and yes, a delectable clip about someone absolutely going in on Just Stop Oil. You love to see it. But now it's your headlines with Aaron.
Hi there, it is 3:31. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. Eamon Holmes has described Philip Schofield as delusional and a liar for a statement released earlier in which he claimed there was no toxicity at This Morning. The GB News anchor, who also presented the ITV programme, responded by saying he was reluctant to give Schofield more publicity, but if he was looking for a fight, he'd picked the wrong person. And this is the statement it came in response to. Schofield released it shortly before This Morning went to air. He said it's the same handful of people with a grudge against me or the show who seem to have the loudest voice. GB News understands ITV is in crisis talks following the scandal surrounding Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague. The car dealer Arnold Clark, the programme's main sponsor, has announced it won't renew its contract in the autumn. And the ongoing scandal could cost the broadcaster tens of millions of pounds in advertising deals. 7 men have been remanded in custody after being charged with the attempted murder of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell in County Tyrone. He was shot several times at a sports centre in Omagh in February. All 7 men will appear before Omagh Magistrates Court via video link on June the 27th. 2 of those men were charged with being members of the IRA and 3 with the preparation of terrorist acts. Police from the UK are to help authorities in North African countries break up people smuggling gangs. Officers from the National Crime Agency will work with their counterparts to stem a predicted surge in migration. According to The Times, the Italian government's predicted up to 400,000 migrants will attempt to reach Europe via Italy this summer, 4 times as many as last year. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick will begin a 5-day tour of North Africa and Europe this week. You can get more on all of our stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Activists held up a banner calling for trans kids to carry guns in shocking scenes in central London yesterday. May I just remind you that this comes relatively hot off the back of a school shooting at a primary school in Nashville where the shooter there identified as transgender. So just in that context, trans activists wearing masks were in Hyde Park where a women's rights event was taking place. Police officers detained a number of people after the rival groups clashed. And viewers can see the banner that simply says, "Arm trans kids." So there it is, only screens if you're watching on television or watching us online, of course. There's a police officer stood just a few yards away. They do nothing yet again. We're going to talk about Just Stop Oil a bit later on, but yet again, here we go. We see people, don't we, talking about this kind of violent behaviour, and yet again we see our police not really doing anything. Joining me now is LGBTQ activist and director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation, Peter Tatchell. Peter, thank you. I put it to you that there is a thing called the trans mafia, and they were out in Hyde Park at the weekend.
Well, I put it to you that the vast majority of trans people and allies are kind, gentle, non-violent, and they engage in thoughtful, rational discussion. The same goes for most feminists who are critical of trans people. Most of them are kind, they have a different point of view, but they do so and express it respectfully. So we shouldn't allow the behaviour of a tiny minority to colour the way we think about these two different groups.
Would you arm trans kids?
Of course not. No, that's absolutely absurd. But I'm absolutely certain that whoever made that placard does not represent 99.9% of trans people.
There's quite a lot of them around them, though, to be fair, Peter. Just to say, if I was at a demonstration and I saw something like that and I was desperate to have my cause given good publicity and to get my views across, I dare say I would actually go and try and do something about that. People watching on television now will be able to see a ring of banners. They look like those really naff Roman soldiers when they all used to put their shields up. They don't want their faces put out there. They've got umbrellas covering their faces. They've got all these flags flying high. It does look like a mob, Peter.
Well, I'm a strong supporter of trans rights and inclusion and have been for half a century. But I do not think it's appropriate to hide your face. If you believe in a principle or idea, you should express it and show yourself. Whichever side of the debate you're on, be open and upfront. Those kind of tactics are counterproductive. And the fact that we're having this discussion now and all this publicity is being given to this tiny, unrepresentative banner about arming trans kids, which is quite clearly absurd and wrong, it just proves how counterproductive it is.
Yeah, but
I want to have a dialogue. I want to have a dialogue with women's rights activists who have concerns about women's rights and trans rights. Let's talk together respectfully and kindly.
I understand that, Peter. Look, I understand that, but I do want to push back on your assertion that this is just a small fringe minority. Look at what happened in Australia and New Zealand with Kelly J. Keane. There was a lot of vitriol north of the border in Scotland as well. If you have a cursory look on Twitter, online, and you see the kind of absolutely abominable abuse that gets volleyed at people who just say that women are women, and you look at the widespread cancellation of, or attempted cancellation of people like J.K. Rowling and all of this hate and death threats that they get, I'm sorry, Peter, but it is not a small minority of people. In fact, when you actually look at the small minority of people who are trans or are transitioning or something like that, and you extrapolate the amount of abuse and hate and issues like this that are dished out, it's actually a strangely large proportion.
Well, it's a very small vocal minority, but it does cut both ways. Trans women and allies get the same kind of abuse and threats. Because I support trans rights, I've had threats to kill me, rape me, and castrate me from people who claim they are defending women's rights. So it does happen in a small minority of cases, a very vocal minority, on both sides of the argument. And it's wrong on both sides. We have to cool it. We have to discuss this issue. It's a human rights issue. We have to discuss it in a calm, polite, courteous way and recognise that there are people who have different points of view. And I find some of the trans critics very offensive. But I'm not going to abuse them. I'm not going to threaten them. I want to have a dialogue.
OK, why should women be made to feel less safe because somebody who feels like a woman wants to enter their changing rooms? Because that is a lot of what this is about, really, isn't it? Because I interview a lot of trans people on this show, and the majority of the ones that I talk to, frankly, just want to get on with their lives, don't really have any desire at all to get into any hoo-ha when it comes to going into a women's changing room or anything along those lines whatsoever, don't really think that male rapists who now say they're a woman should be in a woman's prison. So I completely get all that. So why should women have to pander to a fraction of a percent of people who say that they feel like a woman?
Well, you know, trans women have been using women's toilets for decades, and I can't remember a single occasion where they have caused a problem, where they've assaulted a woman or whether they've made a woman feel unsafe. It just hasn't happened. But of course, having said that, I understand women's anxieties and I want to find a solution, but the solution has not got to be a generalized attack on trans people or generalized bans or exclusion. You know, people who do bad things, there are all kinds of people who do bad things. There are some trans people who do bad things, but that's not an excuse to demonize and exclude the whole trans community.
Can I just, I've literally, as you've said that, Peter, right, I just Googled while you said that you can't remember an incident, and there's a headline here, straight away, transgender woman 18, sexually assaulted girl 10 in Morrison's toilet. So, I mean, it happens, right? You can't say it doesn't happen, it happens.
Okay, well, I was not aware of that particular case, but even so, out of the many instances, the tens of thousands, the millions of times trans women have gone into women's toilets, that is a very atypical and unrepresentative incident. Most trans women respect a biological woman. They have behaved with absolute decorum and courtesy towards other women. They are not a problem, and we mustn't go down the road of demonizing them. It's so cruel, so unkind, and I think we just have to have a bit more generosity.
Okay. Is any woman who thinks that someone born with a penis can't be a woman a TERF?
Well, I don't use that term because it is deemed to be an insult, and I don't want to get into insulting people. I want to have a debate, a discussion. I want to produce evidence. So in my view, I think if someone does not acknowledge the reality of trans identity, then that is very offensive. And I've got to say, we're talking about two different things here. Biological sex is a reality, and we have to acknowledge that. There are women who are women because of their biology, but there are also women who are women because of their gender identity.
Who think that they're women.
Two different things, Both are valid. Both are valid and shouldn't be in competition with each other. There are two different kinds of women, but both are equally valid. And both equally deserve respect.
Just one last one to you, Peter, if that's all right. I wonder what your view on this is. When I read out things like LGBTQ activists, I think there are quite a lot of the LGBs who would quite like to ditch the Ts from their particular group at the moment. I know quite a lot of gay men, actually. In fact, I was just chatting one to the other day who said this exact thing to me. Who said, why am I bracketed in the same group as transgender people? Is this movement or group going to eat itself alive with internal division?
Well, all the surveys show that overwhelmingly the LGBT plus community feels united and wants to work and support each other. Historically, trans people have been part of the LGBT plus movement, going back 50 years and more. Some of the people who were at the inception of the gay liberation movement in the United States in the 1960s, they were trans people. I think we have to find our common ground, not just a common ground between LGB and T people, but our common ground with women. Women who are concerned, I hear your concerns. Let's work together to find the common ground and the solution. Don't fight each other. That just gives victory to the misogynists and those who want to do us all down.
Look, Peter, thank you. As ever, always appreciate your time. Peter Tatchell there, who's the director of the Peter Tatchell Foundation. Really interesting, and I think credit where credit's due there, you know, completely condemning this Armed Trans Kids banner, completely condemning these people that are coming out and covering their faces and going and causing trouble. So, fair play in that sense. But from September, moving on, police in London will not attend emergency calls if they are linked to mental health incidents. It's a decision that has not gone down well with everybody. I can very much see both sides of this. I think, unequivocally, we need our own rapid response mental health force. It removes the need for police to take time away from stabbings and burglaries and robberies, and also, frankly, it will mean better mental health care for people. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and we are Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Welcome back. At 4 o'clock, I will tell you why record migration figures are forcing rents up by a massive 8%. Yep, you don't hear a lot of those young lefties moaning about the rental crisis, talking about the realities of the reason why, though, do you? But there we go. Moving on, as Britain continues to suffer a mental health crisis, the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, Sir Mark Rowley, has announced his officers will stop responding to 999 calls linked to mental health incidents from September unless there is an immediate threat to life. It's very controversial, this. The decision is designed to free up officers to solve and prevent crime, but it's also been criticised by mental health charities such as Mind, who fear officers will be forced to decide themselves if an incident is a matter of life or death, despite not being trained to do so. I am now joined by Pastor Mick Fleming, who is the founder of the Church on the Street charity and a mental health campaigner. Look, thank you very much. It's great to have you on the show. I really do appreciate it, Pastor Mick. I can see both sides of this because a huge amount of police time is unfortunately taken up with dealing with people's mental health problems, which is a catastrophic situation. At the same time, I suppose you could argue the fundamental job of police is to, you know, promote law and order and all of this stuff. So would you presumably want there to be more funding for some kind of rapid response mental health unit instead, not just a big void left?
Yeah, that's essential at the moment. So it's training. I think every borough should have their own mental health police or response that are actually trained and they're actually picking this up. I mean, and also so what's an emergency? Do you know what is an emergency? You know, so we have, you can imagine a scenario, can't you, with somebody led in the middle of the road. They're led in the middle of the road and they're mentally ill. Right, get him an ambulance. No, hang on, he's got an orange banner with him. All right, we'll be there in 2 minutes. Do you know what I mean? It's like, what is the criteria? What's that all about? And society is becoming so fragmented that, even the police are breaking it down into the, it's really sad to say this. It's like, we'll decide what crime we go out to, and that's not what that's not the job of the police. The police. I'm not
sure I see this happening, Pastor Mick. I've got to be honest with you, because I can see the court cases now where someone calls in and says, I'm mentally unwell, and if they are, especially having an episode, it might be quite difficult, unfortunately, to get much sense out of them at the time, and it's judged to be non-life-threatening, and someone, does the extreme situation that can happen all too often, unfortunately, and then, there's an inquest, isn't there? And you go, well, why didn't you attend that scene? Well, because it was a 50-50 decision and someone had just been stabbed down the road, and I thought I had these new rules that said that I didn't have to go to it. I don't see it working.
I agree. I think it's just going to open a minefield up. So the public are going to be more at risk. The police are going to not know where their heads are, what they're supposed to do and not supposed to do. And the patients, who are people who are suffering and struggling, are not going to get the help and support that they need. So we're seeing now, street homelessness growing, addiction growing. We've got people with serious mental health issues living on the street, right? They're coming under the radar. So we're not going to go and respond to that. This is very, very dangerous times. And it's a dangerous stance that the Met are taking because, this is not just coming from the police, is it? This is about saving money. But I tell you what, it costs them more money picking the bodies up.
Well, it will. I think you might have been alluding to this earlier, although I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when you see some of the things the police attend to, I am doing a story a bit later on, which is about the police supposedly not doing much, about 80 muggings a day. The burglary statistics are absolutely damning. The rape statistics are absolutely damning as well. When you look at that, it's horrific. And then you do see them escorting Just Stop Oil through the streets of London, and you think, well, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Question of priorities. I can see why the police aren't doing it, but I just think this is going to cost lives, and you've got to fill the void with funding for a specialist rapid response unit, I think, haven't you?
Yeah, that's definitely the way forward. So, I mean, we're not in London where I am at the moment. I'm in the north of England, but we work really closely as a charity with the police and with the mental health teams in one place. And it makes such a huge difference. You know, we sort of end the scenarios before they become major emergencies, but it does cost money. You know, and it's being left to charities is this work, which it shouldn't be, because it's such a serious issue. It should be governmental, you know, and it's a cop-out. As far as I'm concerned, the police and the government are copping out here.
Can I just raise with you something that I'm doing, Pastor Mick? I know that you do a huge amount. You will have your own incredibly worthy causes that you back and that you do, and you're so much more at the coalface of this mental health crisis than I am. I've just, got a position here where I can talk about it publicly, which I do hope to use, and that is what I'm trying to do, because I was staggered to discover that apparently 12 men a day take their own lives, and that suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40, which, in light of the fact that we've just had a pandemic, I think that is pandemic territory, to be perfectly honest with you. I know it's not just men, but I am focusing a bit on male mental health here. And there are groups, like the one I'm trying to raise a bit of money for at the moment. It happens to be Mind, the mental health charity, and we're nearly at 50k raising for that, which I do hope does save some lives. But just quickly, Pastor Mick, if you wouldn't mind, could you just explain to people why charities like Mind and others are so important to try to save some lives?
Because they bridge the gap in between where the police can't be there, where the families, where the situations it's not a normal situation. And charities can step into these spaces, just really quickly. So it's only 12 months ago, 18 months ago or something, that on one street where I'm delivering food parcels, 3 men under 40 killed themselves in 3 weeks. 3 men. And what happens with mental health is once somebody does it, it gives permission for another and another and another. And it's appalling. And they need protecting. I think it's a really, really bad move. Well, thanks for raising it, Patrick. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Thank you. Look, massively appreciated. Let's chat again soon. Well, maybe have a chat off air as well and see if we can sort something out together. But thank you very much for that. That is Pastor Mick Fleming there, the founder of Church on the Street charity and a mental health campaigner. Now, as I was alluding to there, it is less than a month until I dance on stage with the Dream Boys, get my kit off, humiliate myself, but all for a good cause. They boast that they are the most famous male strippers in the UK. I will be doing, on the 28th of June in Bromley, 3 routines on the night. One of them is a solo. Yes, that's right. And I met the lads a couple of weeks ago to learn the moves. I'll be strutting my stuff in Bromley, in Kent, on Wednesday, the 28th of June. Viewers on GB News can see some of the men who I will be performing with on the big night. It's fair to say I look nothing like that. I'm doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind, and I'm delighted to say that we've raised almost £49,000. Our target is 50 grand. I really think that we can hit our target this show if you are as generous, continue to be as generous as you have been. Sue, thank you. She's just dropped a tenner in. Mike, as a £5. No name on this one, 10 quid. But all of these ones, these are the most important ones for me. So many people getting in touch. Jeff, I won't put your surname on, Jeff, to talk about the fact that unfortunately they lost a close member of their family to suicide not so long ago, and it's always stuck with them. That fundraising link is justgiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. I have had to lose some weight in order to do this. In the next hour, I will be reminding you of our good old friend Fatrick Christys and showing you some clips of me when I was, believe it or not, 15 stone 8. And the changes that I have made since then. I am trying to do my bit. I really am. Honestly, thank you very much for everyone who's donating. justgiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. Let's hit 50k today. Right, so moving on from that, here's a little teaser of what I've got coming up. The government is stepping up its bid to solve the migrant crisis, with Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick travelling to Algeria, Tunisia, Italy and France this week, with 400,000 migrants looking to travel through Europe and get into Britain. How do we stop this? Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and this is what I've got for you this hour. An invasion, that's what Suella Braverman called it. Well, I tell you what does 400,000 people gathering in Africa ready to make their way across Europe with a view of getting to Britain actually look like? Our immigration minister is trying to stop that. I'll keep you bang up to date with the latest. In other news, yes, the Philip Schofield scandal continues. I want to know who knew what when and what happens now for Philip Schofield. I'll be having a deep dive into all of that. Yes, and are you safe on the streets? The police, apparently, they're all very well and good escorting Just Stop Oil. Have a nice day, sir. Yes, would you like to block some more traffic? But if you get mugged, they're not solving it. And don't get me started on the burglaries. I'm going to be looking at whether or not our police force have got their priorities right. I'm also going to be talking about this. Talking of Just Stop Oil, well, the Labour Party have caved in, the latest political party to cave in and basically give in to Just Stop Oil's demands for no new oil and gas. So if you vote Labour, do you get Just Stop Oil? I've got Barry Gardner on that shortly, should be good fun. And finally, yes, as I keep banging on about, but it's all for a very worthy cause, I am trying to raise £50,000 for the mental health charity Mind. I will be dancing on stage with the Dream Boys. In under a month now, to be honest with you, I can't wait for it to be over. In under a month now, I am asking for your help. Please, 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 let's save some lives together. JustGiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. Let's hit our target today. See you in a sec. gbviews@gbnews.com is that email address. Get them coming in thick and fast. Do you fear a summer invasion? That's what I want to know. That's what Suella Braverman would call it, is it not? With hundreds of thousands of people reportedly desperately trying to get across Europe and into Britain. And, of course, what next for Philip Schofield? Who knew what when? Do more heads have to roll? GB Views at gbnews.com. Headlines now, though. We're Bethany.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. Here's your latest headlines from the GB newsroom at 4:02. ITV is in crisis talks following the scandal surrounding Philip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague. The programme's main sponsor, car dealer Arnold Clark, announced it won't review its contract this autumn. And GB News understands it could cost the broadcaster tens of millions of pounds in lost advertising revenue. Philip Schofield has rejected claims there was a toxic culture on This Morning. In a statement released shortly before the show went to air earlier, he said, it's the same handful of people with a grudge against me or the show who seem to have the loudest voice. Well, GB News presenter and former ITV This Morning host Eamon Holmes has responded to Schofield's post, saying Schofield has put out a delusional statement. Like Holly, he posted it on Instagram stories, so if it goes wrong, there's no record after 24 hours. I'm reluctant to give the liar any more publicity, but believe me, if you're looking for a fight, you've picked on the wrong person. In other news, 7 men have been remanded in custody, charged with the attempted murder of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell in County Tyrone. Caldwell was shot several times at a sports centre in Omagh back in February. All 7 men will appear before Omagh Magistrates Court next month. 2 men were also charged with being members of the IRA and 3 others with the preparation of terrorist acts. British police will help to crack down on people smuggling gangs in an attempt to stop migrants leaving North Africa. Officers from the National Crime Agency will work alongside authorities in Tunisia and Algeria. The Italian government predicts up to 400,000 people will try to reach Europe via the Mediterranean Sea this summer. That's 4 times as many as last year. The former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell says it's a good move.
Is completely correct that we start looking at where people are coming from, where the conflict zones are, and working with those countries to ensure that they don't come through to mainland Europe and make their way across and then into the Channel. And it takes an international community to stop these things, which is now what we're starting to see.
The Metropolitan Police will stop attending most mental health emergency calls so officers can focus on crime. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has written to Health and Social Care Services to say that from September, police won't respond to those calls unless there's a threat to life. The aim is to give police more time to focus on fulfilling their core roles. The father of an aspiring Royal Marine who was killed by an asylum seeker has spoken exclusively to GB News. 21-year-old Tommy Roberts was fatally stabbed by Langouin Abdul Rahimzai while trying to stop a fight over an electric scooter in Bournemouth. The Afghan double murderer who entered the UK posing as a child was sentenced to life imprisonment. Tommy's father, Peter, told Dan Wootton it shouldn't have been allowed to happen.
The fact he shouldn't have even been in the country anyway, do you feel let down by the system?
Very, very let down. No one checked him out. And even though the foster parent has insisted and given him lots of times, he'd been caught with a knife and she'd taken it away from him. But nothing was done with the social workers, with the immigration, with the police. No one actually asked the question, let's check this guy out. He seems really bad. There's a lot of bad reports about him. Let's just make the phone call and check him out.
You can watch that full interview this evening on Dan Wootton tonight at 9 o'clock. The Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, has come under a renewed wave of Russian missile and drone strikes. School children were forced to take cover as the attack unusually struck during the middle of the day. Authorities say their air defences intercepted all missiles and drones. This wave of strikes follows Russia's biggest attack on the capital since the start of the invasion yesterday. Ukraine has indicated it will launch a counter-offensive imminently. The Canadian city of Halifax has declared a state of emergency as wildfires continue to wreak havoc in the region. This dashcam footage shows a car speeding through flames and smoke, narrowly avoiding a collision with another vehicle. The fires have caused evacuations and power outages, and several schools have been shut down. Earlier this month, the western province of Alberta also declared a state of emergency after wildfires forced tens of thousands of people from their homes. You're up to date on GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
I've got loads for you this hour. I am going to be talking about the migrant crisis because apparently there is a key driving factor behind the rental prices going up, and shock horror, it is indeed mass migration. I'll be talking about that. The police are not solving enough muggings, but of course they are looking after Just Stop Oil, and Labour have apparently given in to Just Stop Oil and vowed to adopt their policy of no new oil and gas. What does that actually mean for the working class who depend on it? But first, I just wanted to pass a few comments on a story that has clearly been dominating the news, rightly or wrongly, for the last few days. So there are lots of headlines about Philip Schofield. Many of them seem to be centred on what now for ITV. Oh, will they can this morning? I'm sorry, but I really don't think that is the biggest issue here. For me, the biggest issue is what it means if a middle-aged TV celebrity begins any kind of interaction with a youngster, helps them out professionally, and then begins a sexual relationship with them as a young adult. Now, it has been widely reported that Schofield met the then boy at a theatre school. The boy reportedly asked Schofield for a job, and, allegedly, Philip used his position of power to help him secure a job interview. According to numerous reports, a sexual affair started after the individual turned 18. But just think about that alleged timeline. Powerful older man does professional favours for young teenager and then embarks on a sexual relationship. I will ask the question, what is grooming? Philip Schofield is a wealthy, previously well-liked, influential, decent-looking bloke living in London, which has a vibrant gay community. He could have had a relationship with a whole host of men in a perfectly appropriate way, apart from the small issue of his wife not knowing, of course. It does seem odd that Schofield would have, at some stage, set his sights on somebody he first met when the individual was 15, helped out with his career, and then worked alongside. So again, and this is very much a moral question, isn't it now, which I will ask, when does mentoring become grooming? My other question would be this: who knew? It's been described as the worst-kept secret in show business. I suspect that one of the reasons Schofield was so protected is because so many people knew about it and didn't act appropriately. Obviously, proving who knew about what and when will be a near impossibility. But the speculation is that there is more to come out, and that there is more to this story. And I very much doubt that Schofield will be the only one who emerges poorly and faces serious consequences. That's the moral question for me on this, which is, when does mentoring become something else? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.com. More on that story. Check out our website as well, gbnews.com. There is a lot of content on there about that. But back to, as many people would argue, a much more important issue. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick will head to Europe and North Africa later this week. He'll be meeting with officials to get a grip on migration. The visit is taking place amid these shocking reports of 400,000 migrants seeking to travel to Europe through Italy, and we know where they're all going to try and come to in most cases. Also, as part of the government's big focus on stopping the boats, it's claimed that UK police could be stationed in North Africa to help crack down on people smugglers operating in the region. There is also reports about hundreds of Albanian criminals in this country just going AWOL. Well, it's not a shock. Why on earth were they allowed back out anyway? Why weren't they sent for deportation straight away? There's also reports of rent prices going up by around 8% as a result, and this is the legal stuff, as a result of net migration. All of those people crying into their Aperol spritzes on rooftop terraces around city centres that say, I can't get a house. Well, yeah, but you don't think about maybe blaming our government's mass migration policy for that, do you? No. Anyway, Catherine Forster, our political reporter, is in Westminster, and she joins me now. Catherine, so Robert Jenrick's on tour, and he is desperately going to try and get to grips with the situation and finally do something about people smuggling gangs.
Well, yes, that's certainly what they're saying. The government is very keen for us to be talking today about all the things that they are doing to crack down on illegal migration. So Robert Jenrick, the immigration minister, as you've said, is going to be visiting North Africa this week. He's going to be in Algeria, in Tunisia, then moving on to Italy, meeting the Italian Prime Minister Giorgio Meloni, and then finishing up in France, seeing how we spend some of that £480 million that we've agreed to give France over the next 3 years. They're saying it's critically important that the international community cooperates because this is a challenge facing Europe, not just us. Italy estimates that some 400,000 people could cross into Italy this year. And of course, from there, they can disperse anywhere in Europe. No doubt a considerable number of them would come to the Channel and try to come to Britain from there. So the thinking is to try to stop this at source. So the police, the National Crime Agency, people will be working in North Africa along with the authorities there to try to identify and then disband these people smuggling gangs. They really feel it's going to be much more effective, of course, and much cheaper if you can stop people coming in the first place. Part of this as well is there's an advertising campaign being launched on social media in Albania this week, basically saying if you come to the UK illegally, you will be detained and removed. So fundamentally, don't bother coming because you won't be staying. So a multi-pronged approach. The government is super keen for us to talk about this. Of course, results have been lacking so far, but it is one of Rishi Sunak's 5 priorities, and they will need to show results before the next election if they are not to be punished by rather a lot of voters.
Absolutely, Catherine. Thank you. Catherine Forster, our political reporter in Westminster. Now, something I'm really looking forward to, actually, is in the next hour of this show, where I am taking a very close look at when people overstay their visa, how on earth do we get hold of them and deport them? Because as far as I can see, it's not really happening all that much. And it's pretty obvious if you walk around town squares and city centres, should it not be pretty obvious who is actually here illegally and who isn't? Dare I say that the people who can't speak a word of English, who sit there in town centres, like, of course, the one in Boston, in Lincolnshire, drinking and smoking all day and not working, I mean, if I had to hazard a guess, I would suggest that they were not here legally. I would also suggest that if they are not actually actively contributing towards our economy. And that is a big problem that is facing us, as around 400,000 people gather around the base of Africa there to make it up to Europe and into Britain. I wonder whether or not, the tip of Africa, I should say, whether or not we are going to actually see an economic benefit from these people actually coming. But in terms of the housing crisis, this was fascinating. This is something that I know a lot of people who watch and listen to this show will have been screaming at their TVs and radios and their laptops time and time again. The housing crisis is not just a question of us not building enough homes. We have got some kind of immigration-style Ponzi scheme taking place in this country, where we keep going, right, we need more immigrants to prop up what we've got, to keep propping it up, and that goes pop at some point. Strongly suspect it's about to go pop, because rampant immigration is causing a problem for the housing crisis. The Telegraph are reporting that record net migration has driven up rents by as much as 8%. New analysis shows the huge number of people moving into rental properties from overseas was a driving factor behind rent soaring over last year. And it's not rocket science, is it? A lot of new arrivals cannot afford a deposit, fair enough. I mean, a lot of people can't these days, of course. So they live in rental accommodation. We're not building enough homes. What does this mean? They're willing to pay for accommodation that, frankly, a lot of people are not, and the housing cost goes up. Housing is already under strain, and there are fears that Michael Gove's rental reforms will push landlords to sell up and shorten supply even further. Joining me now is Assistant Editor of Conservative Home, William Atkinson. William, it's almost like we could see this massive gaping problem coming a mile off, I think, isn't it, my good man? It does not take a genius to work out that under this current Ponzi scheme, as I'm calling it, that we've got, we simply do not have enough houses to accommodate the number of people coming over, and rents are going up, and that means that a load of people in their 30s are still living with mum and dad.
Yes, quite. It's almost like one has to actually think about supply and demand when it comes to the question of house prices. But yes, it's clear that as a consequence of the record numbers that we saw coming in last year, a net migration figure of 606,000, it has been calculated that has forced up rents by about 8%. And that's the bulk of the actual increase in rent costs across the UK in the last year. And that's basically because if you think about those numbers, that actually translates into the demand for around 205,000 new homes if you work on the basis of an average sort of family size of 2.37 people. And I think I've just written about this for The Critic, actually. And I think if you see the actual discussion we've been having about sort of migration and house prices, a lot of those of us who want to talk about the housing crisis we have in this country, a lot of those on the same side of the issue as myself, are unwilling to talk about immigration. They focus solely on planning reform. But you fundamentally cannot have the sort of neoliberal migration system that we have at the moment with the socialist planning system that we choose to combine it with, and not expect prices to be spiralling in the ludicrous way that they have been for the last decade or so.
Absolutely. 2 words, Liberal Democrats. So you want to throw the borders open, and then you also want to stop that planning development on the golf course behind a load of people's houses. So, all right, well, where are they all going to live then? And I can't help but wonder, William, at what point this snaps, because the ordinary man and woman in Britain now, I think, has started to look around and ask themselves this question: am I better off as a result of our massive record net migration figures? And I suspect for many people, and actually especially younger people, William, the answer there is no.
Yes, I mean, I've just been reading London Fields by the late Martin Amis, and in that book they have a thing called The Crisis that goes on in the background that nobody's really willing to talk about. And it finally bubbles over in the last 50 or so pages, and I think it's exactly the same here. It's the old Ronald Reagan question: do you feel any better than you did 4 years ago? And I think an awful lot of people don't, especially my generation. The reason why we're the first ever not to sort of move to the right as we get older is because we're simply unable to accumulate capital. We're unable to get on the housing ladder. But more broadly, as you say, we have an economy now, that's hooked on cheap levels of high immigration. When we haven't fundamentally invested in the sort of productivity increases we need to have done over the last couple of decades, while also, as you say, refusing to build a sufficient number of homes. It is an economic recipe of disaster, and I don't think we can have any sort of stable economic or political settlement in this country which doesn't revolve around A, building more homes, but B, cutting immigration.
And we are now getting, if we haven't already reached, the tipping point where people can go, OK, if we made serious reductions in the level of immigration that we had every single year, we would take a GDP hit. And that is something that's very, very hard to swallow. But if you are asked whether or not you still want to be able to access your local hospital, whether you would like your child to get to school, whether you would like to be able to afford rent, or whether you would like one day to maybe even own your own property, and if you say yes to all of those things and you recognise that we cannot do it with these current level of mass migration, then all of a sudden I think that GDP figure starts to matter a little bit less to people. William, thank you. I could talk to you all day. We'll have to do it again soon. There's, of course, William Atkinson there, who is Assistant Editor of Conservative Home. Get loads more on that story. I'll be revisiting it later on because I am going to be doing a deep dive into exactly how on earth we keep track of people who overstay their visa. We've spoken about damning figures there. I was in Boston, in Lincolnshire. I'm going to go out and about a lot more, by the way, and let me know if you think that there are areas that I should be going to. gbviews@gbnews.com, where local councillors tell me unequivocally that there are people living 10 or 15 to a flat and a house, and there's no way of knowing who these people are. So those legal migration figures, I think, are an absolute joke. Get more on all of this at gbnews.com, which is our website. You'll find the best opinion and latest breaking news. Now, moving on. Philip Schofield has denied that there is a toxic culture at This Morning. Eamon Holmes disagrees. He says that the presenter is delusional. When I come back, I am going to be talking about whether or not Philip Schofield used homosexuality and coming out as a way of masking a massive controversy, and whether or not that's actually deeply offensive. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
No.
Britain's news channel.
$30,000. That's the number of muggings last year that went unsolved. Let that sink in when you see the police force just escorting Just Stop Oil through the streets. I mean, good grief. You'd have more chance of the police turning up if you said, sorry, someone from Just Stop Oil is here now, than you would if you just said someone's just held a knife to my throat and taken my wallet. But anyway, there we go. What exactly are the police doing? But talking of stuff that arguably shouldn't be happening, on to the latest of the Philip Schofield scandal. Look, Eamon Holmes said that the disgraced TV presenter is delusional. Schofield denied claims that there was a toxic culture on This Morning. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I couldn't give a stuff whether or not This Morning continues. I couldn't give a stuff whether it's presented by 2 pigs in ribbons or whoever else. The biggest stories for me are where is the line between mentoring and grooming? OK, and did Philip Schofield use his homosexuality and his coming out as some kind of mask for a broader situation? And, of course, who knew what when? Firstly, I'm joined by the journalist and author Peter Lloyd, who appeared on This Morning in 2015. Peter, great stuff. Thank you very much. Now, I hope you don't mind me asking this. Do you think as though Philip Schofield's big coming out was actually more of a cover-up?
Yes, in a word, yes, that's exactly what it was. And it's not remotely surprising, really, if you look at it. Society rewards and recognizes identity politics. So really, what Philip has done is play right into the hands of all the woke liberals who lapped up the admission of his sexuality, when really, for anybody with a brain, it was obvious what he was really doing, which was trying to cover up a much darker, deeper story.
And I mean, look, I'm a straight man, Peter. Is that particularly offensive to people who have wrestled with their sexuality or had to struggle with coming out or things like that? I mean, to see it allegedly used in that way, potentially.
Yeah, I think it is insulting. I think if you spoke to most gay or lesbian people, they'd be really, really unimpressed by the fact that Philip Schofield has essentially hijacked the movement for personal gain. I mean, you know, it wasn't so long ago that the gay community was aligned with some nefarious behavior, and especially around minors, and it's taken a lot of time and a lot of activism to kind of move away from that. And it seems that Philip Schofield has just set that back several decades.
I am minded of the David Cameron interaction that Philip Schofield had, actually, which you could watch on repeat now, really, and have the mind boggle in many senses of it, just the way that David Cameron reacted to that. Obviously not what Philip Schofield was putting forward. Right. I want to make that very clear. But just going forward in terms of your interactions on this morning, and you have been quite vocal on social media about the...
Me?
Yeah. You're vocal on and off social media, to be fair, Peter, but about the nature, what it was like at the set, the toxicity. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I went on it. I wrote a book a couple of years ago called Stand By Your Manhood, and it was a critique of feminism. And I went on the show to talk about the book, and I was invited on, and it was billed as going to be a very friendly, cordial affair. It was just going to be a nice conversation on the sofa. And it was really a complete setup. When I got there, Phil had essentially briefed all the staff not to talk to me, told them that I was not a very nice person, even though we'd never really met me before, and was really, really critical and unpleasant on screen as well as off screen. In between segments, he would quite casually say, you know, I don't agree with anything you've got to say, and if I had my way, I wouldn't have you here at all. Which is, I mean, he's entitled to his opinion, I don't mind that, but it's just so unbecoming when, you know, I'd been invited on the show, I was there to have a conversation, we were being two professionals, it was meant to be a professional discussion, and he made it very personal and very unpleasant from the beginning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, Peter, do you, just lastly to you, do you find it hard/impossible to believe that people right at the top didn't know exactly what has come out now, bearing in mind that there are also reports that there may well be more on the way?
Right, Patrick, I know you've seen my tweets, so I know you know what I think, and for sure the head honchos at ITV have known about this for a long, long time, and they can sue me for like if you know.
Well, just make sure they don't sue me as well, Peter, before you finish what you're about to say.
No, but it's true. It's true. I mean, they have all known for a long time about the setup, and so have Philip's immediate colleagues, including Holly Willoughby. So the fact that she can lie to the public via the press is particularly galling.
Peter, thank you very much. Peter Lloyd, there, journalist and author, and what he was saying there was in reference to Holly Willoughby, who has come out and said that she did not know anything about this. With me now is Jonathan Shalit, who is a talent manager. Jonathan, thank you very much. Were you absolutely distraught today to see Philip Schofield piping up again on Instagram? I could imagine people like yourself just saying, Phil, just leave it, don't comment, and he's raking it all up again. Not good, is it?
I'm not, to say would I be distraught, I have nothing to do with Philip Schofield, so it doesn't have a personal emotion to me. I just think the guy is delusional. He's made, what he's done is so beyond the pale of what's acceptable that he comes out trying to defend this morning. It's almost so him naively believing that somehow he's going to reinstate himself with positive thoughts towards him. So I think it's kind of irrelevant what he said on Instagram stories today.
Jonathan, can I ask you a pretty straightforward question? What's the line, professionally speaking, do you think, in this industry between mentoring and grooming?
Well, I don't use this industry. I don't think it's about this industry. It's what's the line period between mentoring and grooming in any business. It could be banking, it could be pharmaceutical, it could be the car industry. I don't think the fact that we're in the television business makes a blind bit of difference. I, in truth, don't know. I'm not a lawyer. But I read a tweet today by one of your GB News colleagues saying this is classic grooming, and he had met this boy when the boy was age 10. I don't know. That's based on the tweet of a GB News journalist. I simply don't know what the law is and what the legal definition of grooming is. But I do think, from my knowledge, if you take a minor, being a child who is when you're under 18, you are a minor by English law, and then when they come of age, 18 plus, you go on to have an intimate sexual relationship with them. That does strike me as to my understanding of grooming, but I don't know what grooming means legally.
That's fair enough. And there's the added, of course, professional power dynamic to it, which is the other side of this as well. Just quickly, Jonathan, with you, realistically, has Philip Schofield probably got enough money now that he doesn't need to work again? We are not looking at a man on the brink of financial ruin if he just shut up and went away.
I suspect with the legal bills he's going to have and the divorce settlement he's going to have and how he's going to have to spend money on helping his children because he's managed to probably destroy their lives, he won't have enough money to live a comfortable life. He'll have to downsize considerably and probably end up eking out a living in a way he might not like, because I think the consequences financially of what he's done are going to be huge.
Okay. Jonathan, thank you. Always a pleasure. Look, I'll talk to you again soon, my good man. Jonathan Charlotte there, who's a talent manager. Right, OK, just quickly, before I go to the headlines. As most of you know, next month I am performing on stage with the Dream Boys, who are a group of male strippers. Yes, I know. I'm doing my bit to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. I am delighted to say we are very, very close, people, to that target of £50,000 that we set. Thank you to everybody who has been donating. We're on 49,688 quid. I think we'll do the 50 bags this show. Thank you to everyone who's given money. To donate, you can go to justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Let's save some lives, ladies and gents, because this is what happens when people are suffering with mental health issues. If they can't get on the NHS, groups like Mind step in and really try to help people out. So let's raise some lives. Anyway, or save some lives even by raising some money. Those must come between now and 5 o'clock. Find out why the Met Police is being criticised after a whopping great big policy change. And I will ask a Labour MP whether a vote for Sir Keir Starmer's party is actually a vote for Just Stop Oil. But now it's your headlines with Bethany.
Patrick, thank you. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom at 4:33. ITV is in crisis talks following the scandal surrounding Philip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague. The programme's main sponsor, Arnold Clark, announced it won't renew its contract this autumn, and GB News understands it could cost the broadcaster tens of millions of pounds in lost advertising revenue. Philip Schofield has rejected claims there was a toxic culture on This Morning. In a statement released earlier, he said, "It's the same handful of people with a grudge against me or the show who seem to have the loudest voice." Meanwhile, GB News presenter and former ITV This Morning host Eamon Holmes responded, saying Schofield has put out a delusional statement. Like Holly, he posted it on Instagram stories, so if it goes wrong, there's no record after 24 hours. I'm reluctant to give the liar any more publicity, but believe me, if you're looking for a fight, you've picked on the wrong person. 7 men have been remanded in custody, charged with the attempted murder of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell in County Tyrone. Caldwell was shot several times at a sports centre in Omagh back in February. All 7 men will appear before magistrates next month. 2 of them were also charged with being members of the IRA and 3 with preparation of terrorist acts. Police from the UK are to help authorities in North African countries break up people smuggling gangs. Officers from the National Crime Agency will work with their counterparts to stem a predicted surge in migration. The Italian government predicts up to 400,000 people will try to reach Europe via the Mediterranean Sea this summer. That's 4 times as many as last year. You can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Patrick.
New research has shown that more than 30,000 muggings went unsolved last year. That's 80 a day. And the authors of the research have warned that their findings show that muggings are effectively being decriminalised. We've all seen some of these shocking images of supermarkets in America, haven't we? Where people can go in willy-nilly, trash the place, put whatever they want in their bag and leave. Petty crime, even though that's not that petty crime in America appears to have just been accepted now, and apparently it's happening over here. Good luck walking down the street with one of these in your hand. Someone on a bike pulls up, nicks it, you call the police, well, using somebody else's phone, that probably gets nicked en route, and then the police don't do anything about it. Presumably, the police will claim that this is because they don't have the manpower to solve these muggings. But maybe if our police stopped dedicating so many officers to protecting Just Stop Oil protesters and apprehending people who simply want to get to work on time, then they would find a lot more crimes get solved. To give his opinion on this story is Professor Simon Harding, former Senior Investigating Officer at the Met Police. Look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Am I being unfair here? I mean, I look at this now and I feel as though we're not safe on the streets, and I see police doing the Macarena at Pride events and guarding Just Stop Oil and all of this stuff, and I think, what are you doing?
I think the only unfair is call me Professor, which I'm obviously not.
I did think that. I did think that. You know, for some reason, you're now a professor. Anyway, let's get back to the matter in hand. Simon, go on, carry on.
No, yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to understand how long it takes to deal with certain things such as robbery. I mean, robbery itself, the definition of robbery is slightly different. So if they are specifically talking about robberies, you're talking about theft with violence or theft with a weapon. So walking into a shop and stealing a number of items is not going to be classified under that robbery heading. General sort of theft and walking in and shoplifting, as they call it, then yeah, there seems to be an upward trend in this kind of crime, and we're not really seeing a huge amount of response. People are having to get their own security guards, for example. So you know, it's a very difficult situation for the police to be in, especially when you're talking about trust and confidence. But you know, I've worked in robbery squads all over London, in Croydon, in Kingston, in Wimbledon, and in central London. And you know, sometimes when you do really well and you solve a number of them, and the crime level shrinks, they think that then you can take that group of people and put them into another area. And of course, if you do that, then robberies then go up. So it depends where your resources. Now, where are the resources being placed in different things? And perhaps this new announcement by Sir Mark Rowley around the mental health policy is a direct result of that. We're not being able to, the police aren't being able to solve all these because of that, the amount of time they're being taken doing other things.
Look, absolutely. And again, you know, in light of the fact that I am also trying to raise money for a mental health charity, I am minded to see both sides of this. But I legitimately do, because whenever you watch these sometimes wonderful police documentaries, you realise the amount of time that is taken up dealing with people, very unfortunately, who are having some kind of mental breakdown. Now, that's not really the police's bread and butter, but unfortunately it appears to be becoming their bread and butter enough. All I would say again about this mental health thing is you've got to supplement that with some kind of rapid response mental health unit. But we've been over that. If the police are wasting something like 11,000 police shifts every couple of months dealing with Just Stop Oil, for example, is that not really part of the problem here, that you are more likely to see a police officer behind a slow-walking group of orange-clad morons than you are at the scene of an old lady who's just had her handbag pinched?
Yeah, I mean, the disproportionality around that seems to be even those who are in the police and those who are out of the police now can't quite understand why it's being, you know, the obstruction of a highway was still an offence, you know, it should still be dealt with as that. But the sort of the essence behind the mental health part of it is just one of those things. Now it's probably one policy you're seeing change. You might see other policies coming in where the police are being used in other parts of society where perhaps they shouldn't be. But I think with the mental health one, You know, there's a lot of people have been talking about it this morning, especially around, you know, from Mind and people like that, and quite rightly, you know, slightly concerned that the changeover is so quick, you know, the 1st of September. But of course, you know, someone's got to make a decision for that officer not to go to a certain crisis, and then that person will be held to account for that. So I think it'll be just those things where transportation to mental health units could be done by somebody else, sitting with a mental health person who has mental health in an establishment when it doesn't have to be a police officer.
Yeah.
Those will be the slight changes you'll see to free them up to do the other thing.
Steer us back gently towards the mugging side of it, if that's okay, though, because I keep seeing videos on social media of scrawny-looking police officers who, frankly, just look a bit vacant, right? And someone committing a crime, and the police almost asking them to stop or trying to apprehend them, and them getting shoved off. And you always see the same caption with it: "Our police are a joke." I mean, are they?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think a lot of them are terrified to do the wrong thing now. You know, there's the scrutiny on the police is so much, and it's not just from the members of the public. And quite rightly, there should be scrutiny on, you know, policing by consent. But I think also that the biggest issue is that they're being looked at so strongly within their own rank and file, and I'm sometimes a little bit afraid to take that step. And as long as you justify what you do, you know, if they should be stepping in certain situations where they don't step in, and a lot of us see that. A lot of people, you know, police officers will look at that and go, "Why isn't that officer doing what they should be doing?" And I think, you know, it could be training. You know, training has all gone from the Met in terms of like regional training and monthly training and all that. It's just now learning on the job. People coming in direct entry, so a lot of people are learning very, very quickly on the job straight away, rather than, you know, being helped and mentored as much as possibly that people like myself was, or others, you know, who have been in the last 30 years.
OK. Look, thank you very, very much. That's Simon, not a Professor Harding, I must add, a former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. How do you feel? I've just had an email in here from John. When I was general manager, I'm just going to wheel my laptop over, apologies. When I was general manager of a large DIY store, our store detectives regularly apprehended shoplifters at times with hundreds of pounds worth of stolen goods. And then when the police were called, it took hours for an officer to attend. When they did, they generally looked peeved, like we'd bothered them. And, John, I suspect this is an all-too-common thing, especially in light of the fact that 80 muggings a day seem to go unattended to. I mean, you want to know, don't you? You want to know that if you go out on the street and your phone is nicked or your wallet is nicked or whatever, this is why, especially elderly people, don't want to go outside at night in towns, because they do not feel safe. I know that we need more police officers, but we also have to use them more effectively, don't we? Those are my views, of course. I've got a lot more coming your way, but I just want to say I have got, I believe... Have I? Yeah! Breaking news, ladies and gentlemen. You have raised, wonderful people, £50,000 for the mental health charity Mind. Get in. I will be performing on stage with the Dream Boys, who are a group of male strippers. I am doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. We need to save some lives. Too many people every single day are taking their own lives. Too many people are suffering in silence with mental health problems in this country. They cannot, in some cases, they struggle to access the NHS. And this is where groups like Mind come in. Suicide is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40, and that is absolutely shocking, OK? I will be getting my kit off on stage in Bromley in Kent on the 28th of June, and a little bit later on this hour, I'm going to be reintroducing you to an old friend of ours, known politely as Patrick Christys, who weighed in at a fighting weight of 15 stone 8 pounds not so many months ago. I'm doing my best to try to get in shape. Thank you, everybody who has raised £50,000 for Mind. Let's save some lives, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you. Right, OK, you can keep fundraising, though. JustGiving.com/fundraising/Challenge Christys. Think we can make it to 60, or am I being too greedy? But moving on. Sorry, apparently I've got some news today. Suella Braverman says that Sir Keir Starmer is in bed with Just Stop Oil's donors. Hopefully not literally. That's another scandal in the mix, isn't it? If you vote Labour, do you just get eco-activists? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Dubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
To be voted for has backfired.
You don't see many locals about anymore.
Do you feel as though you've got what you asked for?
No, not at all.
From my point of view, yes. From a business point of view.
This was to campaign to just to get a referendum.
Just to get a referendum.
We need people like Nigel to grab it. Come on, lead the country.
They tell us at elections what they want us to hear, but they never actually really mean it.
We're proud to be GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. OK, so there's some big news in town. And just to say that at 5 o'clock, I will be taking a close look at the migrant crisis and ask what happens when people's visas run out, but they don't go home. This is a question that I don't think is asked often enough, even though it seems blindingly obvious. So we'll be talking about all of that. But Suella Braverman has accused Sir Keir Starmer of being in bed with Just Stop Oil, which is an image, isn't it, to say the least. The Labour Party has received £1.5 million from businessman Dale Vince, who has backed the protest group. It was reported yesterday that new North Sea oil and gas developments will be blocked under a Labour government. Let this sink in. Just Stop Oil, holding people up in the streets, criminal damage, you name it. What do they want? They want no new oil and gas. Labour Party takes £1 and a bit million from Just Stop Oil and enacts that policy. Here to discuss this now is Labour MP Barry Gardner. Barry, thank you. Great to have you on the show. So, if you vote Labour, you get Just Stop Oil.
No, not at all. If you vote Labour, what you get is energy security. Because the point is this. If you read what the International Energy Agency has said in its latest report about achieving net zero, then they have said that we must stop developing new oil fields. We have to stop drilling for new oil. Now, we have still reserves in the North Sea. Of course, most of that is not sold into Britain. It doesn't provide us with energy security. It's actually sold on the international markets. It goes elsewhere. So it's not actually a way of maintaining our own energy security, but that's precisely what a transition to clean energy would do. It gives us the security of generating our own, actually much cheaper energy. If you look at the way in which onshore is much, much cheaper now than any other form of energy.
One thing I'm amazed at, Barry, is that the Labour Party cares more about donations and the views of Just Stop Oil than it does from one of your biggest donors, the GMB union, who have come out and said that you should not do this. So why has Labour sold its workers down the river in order to appease some idiots in orange vests?
Well, Patrick, that's not the case at all.
It is the case. I'm reading it.
You will understand that what Keir Starmer and the Labour Party is talking about a just transition, creating the new jobs. You don't want to lock workers into the old dinosaur jobs that are in the fossil fuel industry. What you want to be doing is creating new jobs for them to go into and making sure that they're getting the training to do that. Now, you're showing a whole load of Just Stop Oil protesters there. Equally, what you have to understand is that all the science, all the International Energy Agency, which is the most respected economist in the world on these matters, is saying that what the Labour Party is proposing is the right thing to do. Not just right morally, but right economically.
Talking of being right morally, Barry,
because a transition to clean energy is the only way of ensuring.
Talking of being right morally, Barry, what the Labour Party, what I think the Labour Party is showing here is that if you partake in massive civil unrest, civil disobedience, criminal damage, stop people getting to hospital appointments, throw a little bit of whatever it is over the Chelsea flower show or a snooker table, the Labour Party will give you what you want. Why have you given in to people who are breaking the law, Barry?
Patrick, this is just complete nonsense. I'm sorry.
You've just stopped oil. You've done it. You've given it to them.
What you're saying? I've been on the media saying that I think Just Stop Oil is counterproductive. I applaud the fact that people are concerned about the climate. Of course I do, but I think it's completely counterproductive.
But it's not, because you've done it, Barry.
Actually alienate. If you let me finish, that actually alienate the public from the cause that you want them to understand. So I don't agree with the ways in which Just Stop Oil go about it. It's got nothing to do with that. This is about the economics. Why should it be that the British public, that you and me, Patrick, taxpayers, are actually the people who will bear the entire cost of the research and development of the Cambo field that's got licensed for the North Sea? That's because the Chancellor has introduced a tax regime, which means that you and I, as taxpayers, pay them in tax dividends. Okay,
but you cannot say, Barry. But you cannot say.
So this is not cheap. This is
I understand
not cheap.
that.
This is not something that is going to help our economy.
I get that.
It's actually taking more money out of the pockets of British taxpayers.
Barry, I understand, but when I flick a switch, the lights come on, and when I want to go and put something in my car or do whatever, or we need basic works done, that actually happens. And Barry, if you're being completely honest, you, as of today, cannot 100% guarantee the electorate, can you, that if we stop all new oil and gas and implement clean energy, that it will definitely work? Because we haven't got it all yet, have we?
No, sorry, Patrick, you're just wrong, I'm afraid.
Okay,
If you look at the imports of energy that this country needs, we can maintain supplies. We don't have to have new oil drilled for, not new gas drilled for. We have already got supplies that are 4 billion barrels in the pipeline. And not only that, we're interconnected. We're interconnected with electricity, with the continent, and we're interconnected with gas, which is actually cleaner gas than we can produce coming from Norway. So actually we can be cleaner, we can be cheaper, and we can transition those jobs into the new economy if we do exactly what the Labour Party is proposing.
Barry, thank you. I do always enjoy our back and forth. Great to have you on the show. Barry Gardner there, Labour MP. Right, OK, the government is stepping up its bid to solve the migrant crisis. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick is travelling to Algeria, Tunisia, Italy and France this week. Up to 400,000 migrants will seek to travel through Europe and potentially into Britain this summer. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Good evening, it's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys on GB News, and it's a very, very action-packed hour. How many illegal immigrants are in the UK, and what, if anything, are we really doing to deport them? These are all questions I want answering, and I will be doing so in just a few minutes' time. Philip Schofield, what's the latest? More Schofield drama? Are there more revelations on the way? I want to know who knew what when, and what is the line between mentoring and grooming? In other news, we're also going to be talking about this. Calls to arm trans kids. Yes, that's right. In my view, this is the trans mafia, and they are out to silence women. I'm also going to be talking, of course, about this story as well. Thank you to everybody who has raised £50,000 for the mental health charity Mind. I am holding up my end of the bargain just about. I'm on some kind of epic health kick, although it's hard to tell from this angle, I think. And I will be dancing on stage, getting my kit off with the Dream Boys, all for a good cause, all for a good cause. Thank you, thank you, thank you, wonderful people. Why stop at 50? Let's see if we can get to 60. Come on, let's save some lives together. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Yes, there we go. I will humiliate myself in the name of a good cause. See you soon. When you walk around your local high street and you see people lingering around, not really speaking any English, maybe drinking, taking drugs, all of this stuff, do you wonder, are they here legally? Well, I wonder that as well, and I'm going to get some answers to those questions very shortly. GBViews@GBNews.com. I suspect, by the way, the answer is possibly no. Now, though, here's your headlines with Bethany.
Patrick, thank you. I'm Bethany Elsey with your top stories from the GB newsroom at 5:01. ITV is in crisis talks following the scandal surrounding Philip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague. The programme's main sponsor, car dealer Arnold Clark, announced it won't renew its contract this autumn, and GB News understands it could cost the broadcaster tens of millions of pounds in lost advertising revenue. Philip Schofield has rejected claims there was a toxic culture on This Morning. In a statement released this morning, he said, "It's the same handful of people with a grudge against me or the show who seem to have the loudest voice." Well, GB News presenter and former ITV This Morning host Eamon Holmes has responded, saying Schofield has put out a delusional statement. Like Holly, he posted it on Instagram stories, so if it goes wrong, there's no record after 24 hours. I'm reluctant to give the liar any more publicity, but believe me, if you're looking for a fight, you've picked on the wrong person. In other news, 7 men have been remanded in custody, charged with the attempted murder of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell in County Tyrone. Caldwell was shot several times at a sports centre in Omagh in February. All 7 men will appear before magistrates next month. 2 men were also charged with being members of the IRA, and 3 of them with preparation of terrorist acts. British police will help to crack down on people smuggling gangs in an attempt to stop migrants leaving North Africa. Officers from the National Crime Agency will work alongside authorities in Tunisia and Algeria. The Italian government predicts up to 400,000 people will try to reach Europe via the Mediterranean Sea this summer. That's 4 times as many as last year. Former Conservative advisor Claire Purcell says it's a good move.
It is completely correct that we start looking at where people are coming from, where the conflict zones are, and working with those countries to ensure that they don't come through to mainland Europe and make their way across and then into the Channel. And it takes an international community to stop these things, which is now what we're starting to see.
Metropolitan Police's plans to stop attending emergency mental health incidents has been branded as potentially alarming by a former Inspector of Constabulary. Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has written to Health and Social Care Services to say that from September, police won't respond to those calls unless there's a threat to life. The aim is to give officers more time to focus on tackling crime, but Zoe Billingham warned the move could be dangerous and that it could lead to a vacuum in care. The father of an aspiring Royal Marine who was killed by an asylum seeker has spoken exclusively to GB News. 21-year-old Tommy Roberts was fatally stabbed by Lawangeen Abdul Rahimzai while trying to stop a fight over an electric scooter in Bournemouth. The Afghan double murderer who entered the UK posing as a child was sentenced to life imprisonment. Tommy's father, Peter, told Dan Wootton it shouldn't have been allowed to happen.
The fact he shouldn't have even been in the country anyway, do you feel let down by the system?
Very, very let down. No one checked him out. And even though the foster parent has insisted and given him lots of times, he'd been caught with a knife and she'd taken it away from him. But nothing was done with the social workers, with the immigration, with the police. No one actually asked the question, let's check this guy out. He seems really bad. There's a lot of bad reports about him. Let's just make the phone call and check him out.
You can watch that full interview this evening on Dan Wootton Tonight at 9 o'clock. Explosions have rung out across Ukraine's capital as Russia launched its 16th air attack on Kyiv this month. School children were forced to take cover as the attack unusually struck during the middle of the day. Ukrainian military say their air defences intercepted all missiles and drones, and there are no reports of any injuries. Today's barrage followed 2 nights of heavy drone strikes, with Ukraine indicating it will launch a counter-offensive imminently. The Canadian city of Halifax has declared a state of emergency as wildfires continue to cause havoc in the region. Dashcam footage shows a car speeding through flames and smoke, narrowly avoiding a collision with another vehicle. The fires have caused evacuations and power outages, and several schools have been shut. Earlier this month, the western province of Alberta also declared a state of emergency after wildfires forced tens of thousands of people from their homes. You're up to date on GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
There is such a thing as the trans mafia. It's not a representation of the vast majority of the trans community who, from what I can tell from conversations with many trans people on my shows, just want to get on with their lives and have no real desire to enter into women's spaces. But there is a hardcore militant element that actually wants to arm trans kids. And it's worth noting that this comes hot off the back of a mass shooting at a primary school in Nashville where the perpetrator claimed to be trans. We are being gaslit here on 2 grounds. Firstly, it is demanded of us that we suspend biological, medical and scientific fact that somebody who is born a man can never be a woman. Secondly, that it is pro-women's rights speakers and backers who are the aggressors. It almost always seems to be the ones with the trans flags who are doing the shouting and the physical assaults, doesn't it? There shouldn't be any compromise on women's safety and allowing men into their changing rooms. The fact that that is dangerous. We shouldn't compromise on that view. There shouldn't be any compromise on women's sport. Allowing men to compete and win is ridiculous, offensive and unfair. There shouldn't be any compromise on children's health. Allowing a radical trans lobby group to influence government policy and help push for children to undergo irreversible medical procedures is shocking. Children at a young and impressionable age should not have trans ideology pushed onto them in schools. There is no way that for the last however many hundreds of years, 1 in 10 people have been walking around feeling like they are the wrong gender. There's no way. But it's happening now because, in my view, an element of indoctrination is taking place. On one side of this debate, we have women asking to not have men in their changing rooms. On the other side of it, we have an angry mob shouting the word fascist, calling for kids to be given guns, and then trying to cancel anyone who opposes their cause. Well, I know which side I'm on, and I know which side history will remember well. I'm returning to this topic a little bit later on in the show. In case you missed it, yes, that's right, another demonstration in Hyde Park, a women's rights rally, essentially, was just corrupted massively by some absolute lunatics who decided that they wanted to arm trans kids. GB Views at gbnews.com. More on that story later this hour. But this is a big one for us, OK? The government is set to launch an advert campaign in Albanian to deter migrants from crossing the channel in small boats. Bit late, possibly, given that now the number of Albanians crossing the channel has actually decreased. But the Home Office says the campaign will aim to bust the myths of organised crime gangs who use social media to encourage people to take dangerous routes to the UK. Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick will visit North Africa and Europe later this week. The trip is taking place amid reports that up to 400,000 migrants will seek to travel through Europe to Italy and then, of course, into ours. Country as well this summer. Look, very shortly, I'm going to be having this discussion, a discussion that needs to be happening more often. When people abscond or overstay their visa, how on earth do we track those people down? If, like in Boston and Lincolnshire, you just walk around, and all you see is people hanging around, unable to speak English, certainly the ones that I try to talk to anyway, certainly from what the locals say. If you speak to a lot of local councillors, they're living 10, 15, 20 people to a house, and they are not working, so they clearly, at the very minimum, are not contributing economically to our economy, OK? They're just not, all right? Secondly, I strongly suspect that they are not actually legally supposed to be here. What is our Home Office doing about that? What's our immigration forces doing about that? But for the political latest on this, Catherine Forster, who is, I believe, in Downing Street. Yes, you are. You've moved, is there for us. Catherine, so Robert Jenrick, he's gone abroad and he's going to try and have a good look at the problem to try to cut the head off the snake of these people smuggling gangs. Is that right?
Yes, he is. The government are very keen today to get the conversation back off legal migration and those record-breaking figures of 606,000 last year and on to stopping the boats. So they're announcing a couple of things. First of all, as you mentioned, the social media, the adverts going out in Albania to say if you arrive, you are going to be detained and removed. As you say, though, the number of Albanians entering the country is currently down. In the first 3 months of this year, there were only 28 Albanians who arrived, and we do now have a returns agreement with Albania. So let's see how effective that is as the weather gets better. But secondly, as you said, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick is going to North Africa, and basically the theory is that they want to work, police officers from the National Crime Agency, to work upstream with people in Algeria, in Tunisia, etc., to identify these criminal gangs and cut them off at source, because the rest of Europe, Italy particularly, is very worried. They think up to 400,000 migrants might cross the Mediterranean this year. And of course, most of those are not going to stay in Italy. So much, much better if you can deal with this at source, stop people coming rather than a proportion of them coming to Calais. Obviously, we're spending 480 million with the French over 3 years, and stop them coming across here, because of course, as we know, once they get here, they're going to get mired in the asylum claim system. The asylum claim backlog is now at an all-time high. In fact, of all the people who put in claims last year, just 1% of those has been processed. And of course, it's costing a massive £6 million a day to put those people up in hotels.
Absolutely. Catherine, thank you very much. Catherine Forster, our political reporter at Downing Street, with the latest that's going on. Listen to those numbers. Just 1% of the people have been processed. It's costing us at least £6 million a day in hotels and the rest. We're hearing today that rents are going up by around 8% as a direct consequence of mass migration in this country. That's just the legal side of things, OK? And when you walk around town centres now, all too often, what you are seeing is people hanging around doing absolutely nothing. I was in Boston, in Lincolnshire, the Brexit-backing capital of Britain, last week, and I was seeing it with my own eyes. When I go back up north as well to see my family, I see it with my own eyes up there as well. And local councillors were all saying it to me. What they find is that people come over for so-called seasonal work on short-term visas, and they stay. and they disappear because they live in houses that have got 10, 15, sometimes 20 people in them, and there's no real way of keeping tracks on them. What I want to know is this. In light of record net migration figures, which, by the way, I don't think are accurate because of this issue, people overstaying, I want to know, do we actually know how many people are here illegally? Not just people coming over the channel, other people. Do we know how many people overstay, and what are we doing to try to remove them from the country? So, here to do that with me is the former Home Office Minister, Norman Baker. Thank you very, very much, Norman. Great to have you on the show. There he is. So, what does happen, in theory, if somebody comes over on a short-term visa and overstays?
Well, a happy bank holiday to you, Patrick, as well. Look, when we were in government in the coalition, the Lib Dems insisted that we introduced exit checks, and that was to find out who was actually leaving the country, because unless you have exit checks, you don't know when people have left. I hope they're still in place. It was also a way of keeping a track on how many people were not leaving, and that's important because if they want to apply again at some future date to come to the UK, you can identify that they have overstayed. So the exit checks are actually quite important. But in terms of who's not leaving, the vast majority of people who come here legally on short-term visa do leave. The seasonal workers, the students and so on, they've got jobs to go to when they get back. So it's a minority who don't leave, but the exit checks enable you to pick up those who haven't returned to their own country as they should have done. But in terms of picking those up and identifying those, that's one thing. The second thing is enforcing their removal. And as you said, it's pretty terrible. Only 1% of people who applied for asylum have been processed. And that equally applies to those who are overstayed and the Home Office isn't chasing up, because there is insufficient enforcement, in my view, both of overstayers and indeed processing to get refugee claims properly assessed.
But a lot of these people who come over for seasonal work are of marginal economic benefit to this country as it is. They are not the doctors and whoever else that people like to dine out on when they say, look how great it is that our immigration figures are so vast, OK? So these are not those people. And then when they overstay, they contribute absolutely nothing. And the sad fact, unfortunately, is we don't know how many people overstay, do we?
Well, we ought to know because of the exit checks in place, but I don't know whether they're still there or whether the government's abandoned those. I think the farming community and the fishing community would argue that the seasonal workers are very important. Indeed, the government's visa system shouldn't allow people in with a visa if they're not required for seasonal work, which is necessary. And of course, we don't have enough British people picking fruit and so on, so that's why the visas are issued in the first place.
Can I ask, just Norman, on that, sorry to interrupt, but that's a really important point that you make there, because in practice, in theory, I'm inclined to agree with you. But then I go and see and visit a fruit-picking hub and a food processing hub, and I see people walking around who cannot speak a word of English and are not... They clearly don't have a penny to their name, OK? And it's actually, in many cases, quite sad to see, but that is the reality of it. And I do not see how those people were ever given a visa. I mean, we will just give it to anyone, won't we?
Well, I mean, I think there's a quota set by the government, for example, for agricultural workers, and then people apply to fill the quota. And I suppose, to be brutal about it, you don't need to speak English to pick raspberries. So maybe that's the case. You know, the system is not working properly, Patrick. There's no doubt about that. One thing I've always believed in, which is I'm not sure it's a minority view or not, is that people who are here seeking refugee status, that's different from those who are here on visas. But those who are seeking refugee status ought to be able to work when they're here. They ought to be able to contribute to society. That would give them some self-respect and relieve the taxpayer of a big burden.
Well, you could argue that, but again, what you would have to believe there is that people were here genuinely as refugees and not as the group of economic migrants who could have applied legally, and the only reason that they're not applying legally is because they would be deemed to be of economic insignificance to us, and so they come here illegally. But you would let them work, would you?
Well, I can only quote to the figures, which are the vast majority of people who have their asylum claims assessed are actually allowed to stay because the asylum claims are validated. Now, the people I'm talking about, people coming from war-torn areas like Syria and so on, who clearly were in danger of torture or their lives being lost. There was an issue with Albania, which I was quite hard on, to say we shouldn't be allowing Albanians in because they, by and large, were economic migrants. And it appears the government, by negotiating with the Albanian government, which I argued for some time ago, has actually potentially shut that particular avenue off. But most people who apply for asylum actually are deemed to be genuine applicants.
OK. Just to say, Norman, just to return us back to the issue of the overstayers, OK, there should be, clearly, more checks. But when you see these net migration figures dropping, as in them landing, I should say, of course, the figures have actually gone up themselves, they're not true, are they? Because we look around and we do not know how many people have overstayed by definition, and we are not massively checking. I mean, there were 2 police officers in a town square behind me dealing with a couple of very drunken Bulgarians who, dare I say it, they've been Home Office officials, could have checked to see whether or not they actually have the official documentation to stay in the country and solved a problem. But it's not happening, is it? I mean, and we talk about overcrowding in houses and issues with public services and all of this. I mean, if we did clamp down on people and had a more efficient system for knocking on people's doors and finding out who lives in that house and whether or not they've overstayed, then actually we might have a bit more room.
Well, as I say, we ought to know who's overstaying, because unless the government's abolished the exit checks that Lib Dems brought in government, they ought to know that figure. They ought to be able to identify who has left the country, tick them off, as you like, and then, therefore, by definition, who hasn't left the country. That was the point of the exit check. So they ought to be able to give you that figure if you ask for it. But in terms of enforcement, no, I don't think they are enforcing it properly, and they ought to be more rigorous than that. I want to be very fair to people who come here seeking asylum and are genuine refugees. I want to be unfair, if you like, on people who aren't here with proper good reason, and they should be processed and deported quickly.
Norman, thank you. Norman Baker there, is former Home Office Minister. Great to have you on the show. Look, loads more on that story on our website. I just think towns and cities right across the country, you see it with your own eyes. Again, it's another thing we're being asked not to believe, isn't it? That when you see these net migration figures, great, oh, fantastic, look at this, it's great for our economy. Is it? Is it actually? And are we actually in control of the people who are going back? Because then you can add all of those to our net migration figures as well, and you have an even more staggeringly high number, don't you? But go to gbnews.com, you'll have the best analysis and opinion, as well as the latest breaking news. Now, moving on, Philip Schofield has denied that there's a toxic culture at This Morning. Eamon Holmes has said that he's delusional. Look, that's not the point for me. Couldn't give a toss whether or not This Morning carries on. Don't care who presents it. I don't care about it. The question for me, is this, OK? What is the boundary between being a mentor to a young chap and grooming them? When an older, successful, powerful man meets somebody who is a child at the time, helps them professionally, and that relationship turns sexual, what's the line there? What's the line? I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Should we arm trans kids? Yeah, I know. This is seriously what some of the, I'm calling them the trans mafia, are coming out and saying now. It's absolute madness. I cannot understand for the life of me why anyone thinks they're the good guys, but just there we go. But to the latest on the Philip Schofield scandal. Eamon Holmes says the disgraced TV presenter is delusional. Schofield denied claims that there was a toxic culture this morning. That, I think, is the absolute least of his worries. Now, we should stress that ITV bosses say that they knew nothing about Philip Schofield's relationship with another member of staff and that both of them denied it when they were asked. But this has raised serious questions for me. If we just take the reported and alleged timeline of events for Philip Schofield, met this lad when he was 15 years old, OK? Helped him out professionally. That relationship then turned sexual after the age of 18. Is there a line between mentoring and grooming? Marilyn Hawes joins me now, the director and CEO of Freedom from Abuse. Marilyn, thank you very, very much. Let's keep it within the realms of people using in positions of power. In positions of power, looking at younger individuals and behaving in a certain way. What do you think constitutes grooming?
Well, exactly what he's done. It's not even a fine line in the sand. It's a definite line in the sand. There is nothing appropriate about a man who was heading up for his 50s and in his 50s when he started a sexual relationship with this 18-year-old. Now, how did that young man manage to get through to Philip Schofield? I suggest that Philip Schofield had his details. You know, you're talking about they're impressionable at 15, 16. People did. Now, I don't agree. I think there's a toxic silence within ITV, frankly, and I think it raises a lot of awkward questions for Martin Frizzell because there's people who did know. You're telling me that Holly Willoughby didn't know? People have actually said that he was glued to the side of Philip Schofield. How did that happen? How was he referred to as the chosen aide? I think it was in 2018, there was even a pixelated photograph of him with Philip Schofield. You know, when you lie, you tend to get found out. And he has lied. And I think ITV has lied. And for me, this is a massive crossing of professional boundaries. Stick to people your own age if you don't want a flag to be raised. It's the same in teaching. This would be absolutely considered grooming, in my professional world.
Well, this is an important point. This is an important point, Marilyn. Let me just cut you now, because that's an important point, OK? And, yes, again, no doubt Philip Schofield will deny all of this stuff. But in other professions and in other walks of life, behaving in a way not dissimilar to this, I think, would potentially raise question marks, would it not? You've mentioned teaching there. Go on.
A teacher has just lost her job for doing just that. It was, I think it was under the Teaching Regulation Authority, I think, but it was a pupil that had left. She'd gone to another school and they contacted each other on Facebook, social media. It was discovered, lost her job. Quite right. You don't go hanging around in your 50s with people of 17, 18 years old. It's inappropriate. I'm handling a case at the moment of exploitation where a 59-year-old guy is hitting on a 17-year-old girl, and social services are looking at it as exploitation and grooming. I'm sorry, I've never known anyone admit it. He's not going to admit it.
What I don't understand...
There's something in the family here as well, isn't there? Looking at the past few weeks of his brother.
I do appreciate what you're saying, but it is important to stress that there is an important distinction between Philip Schofield and his brother. I just want to stress that. However, yes, OK. But on this, though, I do think, though, that Philip Schofield, if he was a closeted gay man, which he clearly was for a period of time, he's not a bad-looking chap. He's got money in the bank. He's got a famous job. He lives in London, which has got a vibrant gay scene, OK? He could have had an affair with anyone his own age, anyone even 20 years younger than him. It is slightly odd for me, Marilyn, that someone of such a young age as 18 years old would catch his eye in a city as big as London.
Oh, well, absolutely. It is just totally inappropriate. Why did he lie? Was it a murky secret? Look, clearly he was frightened of coming out. But, you know, truly, a fish rots from the head down. So I'm looking at the big top people at ITV where questions need to be answered. Who was silenced? Who, you know, the guy himself said he was never questioned or asked anything from ITV itself. There has got to be, it's imperative that there is a full and transparent investigation by outside people not connected to ITV. I think this absolutely stinks. I truly do. And
look at the coverage. Look at the
state is this young man in now? How is he?
Well, 100%, 100%, and supposedly more to come as well. And we will have to wait and see. I don't want to preempt any of that, but that's what's doing the rounds today. Marilyn, can I just say thank you very much? I think it is genuinely. I think it's about time people. You know, I couldn't care less what they do with This Morning. I couldn't care if they replace it with a cookery show or Homes Under the Flipping Hammer or whatever they do with it. I couldn't care less. For me, these are the big issues, right? And if there's been some kind of cover-up on it, I think it's an absolute shocker.
He's a claim. I've always thought he was fake. I think I've done this job for so many years. I know a fake one. I can always smell it on people. But what annoyed me was the editor who first was the editor for ITV News, Diane Nelms. I read today that she said, listen to this, ITV This Morning should be allowed to die with dignity. There is no dignity. There is no dignity in this. What is she talking about?
Yeah,
I mean,
100%. And we've already done a little bit, Marilyn, in the last hour about people thinking that he actually used coming out as a homosexual man as a way of masking the reality of what was going on. And actually, that's very offensive to a lot of people who really wrestle with their sexuality. But, Marilyn, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Take care. Might see you soon. Marilyn Hawes there, Director and CEO of Freedom from Abuse. Right, OK, look, loads more stuff to come between now and 6 p.m. A remarkable story of the activists who are calling for trans kids to carry guns, and you've done it. You have raised more than £50,000 for the mental health charity Mind. That's ahead of the big night when I get my clothes off and, of course, lose my dignity when I dance on stage with the male strippers. Thank you very much, everybody. But now it's your headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Patrick, thank you. Here's your latest from the GB newsroom at 5:33. ITV is in crisis talks following the scandal surrounding Philip Schofield's affair with a younger male colleague. The programme's main sponsor, Arnold Clark, announced it won't review its contract this autumn, and GB News understands it could cost the broadcaster tens of millions of pounds in lost advertising revenue. Philip Schofield has rejected claims there was a toxic culture on This Morning. In a statement released earlier, he said it's the same handful of people with a grudge against me or the show who seem to have the loudest voice. Well, GB News presenter and former ITV This Morning host Eamon Holmes has hit back, saying Schofield has put out a delusional statement. Like Holly, he posted it on Instagram stories, so if it goes wrong, there's no record after 24 hours. I'm reluctant to give the liar any more publicity, but believe me, if you're looking for a fight, you've picked on the wrong person. 7 men have been remanded in custody after appearing in court charged with the attempted murder of a detective chief inspector in County Tyrone. John Caldwell was shot 7 times at a sports centre in Omagh in February. The suspects will appear before magistrates again next month. 2 of the men were also charged with being members of the IRA and 3 of them with the preparation of terrorist acts. Police from the UK are to help authorities in North African countries break up people smuggling gangs. Officers from the National Crime Agency will work with their counterparts to stem a predicted surge in migration. The Italian government predicts up to 400,000 people will try to reach Europe via the Mediterranean Sea this summer. That's 4 times as many as last year. And you can get more on all of these stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com. Now it's back to Patrick.
OK, good stuff. Activists held up a banner calling for trans kids to carry guns in shocking scenes in central London yesterday. Trans activists wearing masks were in Hyde Park, where the women's rights group Let Women Speak event was taking place. Police officers detained a number of people after a rival group clashed with them. And viewers can see the banner that simply says, "Arm trans kids." And what is also fascinating is that they'll come out with something like that, but they're covering their faces. They've got umbrellas covering their faces, balaclavas on and all of that stuff. And they look like a really tin pot group of those Roman soldiers who used to do that defence mechanism with their shields, didn't they? I mean, good grief. There's a police officer stood just a few yards away. Classic. Does absolutely naff all. Founder of Standing for Women, Kelly J. Keane, who was leading the event yesterday, joins me now, one of my favourite guests on this particular show. Thank you very much, Kelly. What do you make of people coming out like that and saying we should arm trans kids?
Well, I think it's quite a preposterous sign, but it's not really a surprise. My events are now always protested. So my event is all about letting women speak. You know, that terrible, terrible thing that women would like to do when we want to discuss our rights. We want to speak in public, and they turn up to try and stop us stop us talking. And they come and they're aggressive. And their voices are often very male, which is a bizarre coincidence because they're all men.
Yeah.
Well, they're not all men. Let me not be unfair to the women that also come and shout at older women. And it's preposterous. Yes, yesterday one of their chants was trans rights and women's rights, same struggle, same fight, which I thought was quite funny because it was a chorus of male voices screaming and shouting at women about what our rights should be. So. Yeah, it's part of a theme. Okay. They're aggressive, they're intimidating, and they come to try and stop us talking. So
I had Peter Tatchell on earlier. He told me that this is a vocal minority that does not represent mainstream views. But it does seem to be everywhere you go, though, Kelly, doesn't it?
It's certainly everywhere I go. I don't know if that's a coincidence or whether they just hang around in spaces trying to stop all women from talking. But look, they're in government. This whole thing is very coercive. It's really manipulative and it's dishonest. So the reason these young people are emboldened to come out is because the police have been captured. So, you know, the face of it, these sort of people at the bottom of the pond, if you like, these people that come out to scream and shout at women, they are really the bottom of the ladder. And at the top of the ladder are people in government who've just let this happen. We're teaching it in schools. A lot of these kids are really confused. You'll genuinely hear young people think that sex change is possible, that actually what's inside your head and how you feel about who you might be is more important than your biology. So whilst these are the sort of the face of it, if you like, we know that there is this terrible covert operation that's happened that's captured all of our institutions. So everywhere you'd expect a responsible person to step in and condemn this sort of behaviour, they're simply not doing it. But I will say yesterday, the Metropolitan Police did their job really well for the second time in a row, which meant that other women felt that they were safe enough to come out and speak, despite the fact that we knew that we were going to be met with a mob.
Who does it fall on, do you think, to sort this out? Because I think, in my view, it's going to have to be women of a certain age, and women of a certain age who are not working in our public sector or our schools or anything like that, because they'll probably just get cancelled straight away. I don't think you can be a teacher and have your views, unfortunately, at the moment, because you probably get biffed out by some younger teachers. So who has to save us from this lunacy?
Well, Patrick, I think it's me. Look, you say a woman of a certain age.
I wasn't referring to you in that sense, Kelly.
25 years old. I've just had a hard life.
I certainly wasn't referring to you.
No, look, I think you're right. It's women we're past caring. We've had a whole lifetime of it. Most of us are past caring. We're not easily intimidated. Once we've had enough, there really is nothing that you can do to stop us from continuing and speaking. But yes, I mean, I saw my MP, 2015, and I said to him, you're paid to represent me in Parliament. If not you. And he said, well, I think it's you, Mrs. Keane. I was like, oh, OK, well, I'm just a stay-at-home mother. But yes, I think eventually it's... I think
not anymore, you're not. You're a hero.
The solution is government.
You're a hero for a lot of people.
Maybe the two things will combine.
Can I just ask you again, I want to reiterate, because this always absolutely, I found this hilarious when the J.K. Rowling thing kicked off, and then people actually look at what she actually said and realise that there's nothing wrong with that at all. I think it might be worth just reminding people what your actual core mission here is, because there's nothing really wrong with that either, is there? So what is it?
Well, it's a scandal, because I think a woman is an adult human female. And we shouldn't transition children. I mean, I say at the end of no woman has a penis, no man has a vagina. Non-binary is nonsense, and transitioning children is profound abuse.
Right. Thank you very much, Kelly, for clearing that up. It was great to have you on the show, as ever, and take care, look after yourself. It's Kelly J. Keane there, who was leading the event yesterday, leads many events like it, and has got shoulders that just take all of the brunt of all of this. I absolutely take my hat off to Kelly every single time that she's on, so thank you very, very much. Now, the big breaking news this afternoon is that we have raised more than £50,000 for the mental health charity Mind. Well, you have, thank you very much. All I've got to do now is get my kit off with a load of male strippers. So, cheers, guys. Yeah, there we go. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, and when I come back, I'm going to be reminding you of our old friend, Patrick Christys. Britain's News Channel. See you in a bit.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Has backfired.
You don't see many locals about anymore.
Do you feel as though you've got what you asked for?
No, not at all.
From my point of view, yes. From a business point of view.
This was to campaign to get a referendum.
Just to get a referendum.
We need people like Nigel to grab it. Come on, lead the country.
They tell us at elections what they want us to hear, but they never actually really mean it.
We're proud to be GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We've done a lot of serious stuff today. We've done the latest immigration figures, how on earth we're going to stop people essentially invading Britain via coming from Africa and all the way through the continent, etc. We've spoken about the latest trans debate, whether or not we should be arming trans kids, which is, again, absolutely nuts. We've spoken about the police not solving around 80 muggings a day. The Labour Party are getting into bed with Just Stop Oil. So we've done all of that. So I thought I would finish, really, with something a little bit... Well, this is going to make you smile. This is going to make you smile. Why not leave you with a smile on your face? It's Patrick's Pick of the Day, when I focus on a story that you will not see on the front of any national newspapers, it's fair to say, but still caught my eye. And today, the story comes from Sweden. A lot of good stuff comes from Sweden, where a protest group got more than they bargained for on live television. 3 people from a group called Restore Wetlands invaded the stage at some kind of Swedish dancing on stage or whatever the heck they call it. And then they're lobbing all the dye over. They've got the banner, wallop! In comes a camera. In comes a camera. Can we play this again? Can we play this again? Because people, you've got to tune it, you've got to really focus their mind on this to see it in all its glory. 2 dancing people there. Here we go. Woo, bit of Strictly Come Swedish dancing. Protesters come on, there's a banner. They've got the thing, look at us. And then a cameraman goes, have that. Wallop. Yeah, then he goes for the second one as well. It's like being attacked out of something out of Star Wars. You can just see, can't you, the other cameramen running in the background. You know, leave it, Lars. Leave it. It's not worth it. It's not worth it, Sven. Anyway, so there you go. I just thought I'd bring that to you. The couple kept dancing as well, which I think is quite nice, doesn't it? The show must go on. I think. But there we go. Anyway, there is less than a month to go until I dance on stage with the Dream Boys, who boast that they're the most famous group of male strippers in the UK, which is remarkable, especially considering I'm going to be one of them. I'm going to do 3 routines on the night. One's a solo as well. I met the lads a couple of weeks ago to learn the moves. I am strutting my stuff in Bromley in Kent on Wednesday, June the 28th. Viewers on GB News can see some of the men that I'll be performing with now. Very different men to the man that I am in every single way, I think it's fair to say. Now, when I agreed to perform on stage with the Dream Boys, I said I would like to raise some money for charity. And today, we did it, you raised £50,000 for the mental health charity Mind, and I will be eternally grateful for that, thank you. But I also set myself a target of losing some weight. So if you cast your minds back to April the 8th, 2022, this is, well, let's just take it away. All right then, ladies and gentlemen, it's weigh-in time. It's the moment that I've been dreading. I honestly have not looked at the scales, deliberately so now, for at least the last 6 months. During that time, though, I have looked at a lot of takeaways and quite a few pints. So, yes, the damage may well have been done. But I needed some help to get weighed today. I needed someone who can really give me a hand, someone who knows about what it's like to be in peak physical condition. So, Tom Howard, how are you?
I am feeling very well. I've just got back from holiday, actually,
yes,
which has been tremendous. But I gather you were on holiday, actually, recently as well.
Yeah, I was. We did it very differently there, I imagine. I didn't recognise you with your top on after all these holiday pictures that we've had. But how much do you reckon I might weigh?
I hope we're doing this in pounds and stone, proper imperial metrics.
Proper
absolutely.
British weight.
None of this continental stuff.
No, we're going to leave that.
So I'd say around 15.
Around 15
around
stone?
15 stone.
OK, well, fingers crossed it's less than that, although I'm not sure. Shall we do it?
Have a look.
All right. OK, ladies and gents. Gosh. Oh, God. I am so fat. So it's can't make its mind up. I think I'm 15.8. There we go. We've settled on 15.8 whole British stone.
Patrick, I said that to try and make you feel better when you came under it. But you've come. I'm so sorry, mate. I don't have any words.
So I've got to lose 1.5 stone in 2 months. So my maths is terrible. What would that take me down to? What about 15.8? Anyway, we'll figure it out. I'm sorry, I should know that really, but I'm just in shock at the weight. I look like someone who gets weighed at the zoo. OK, all right. Well, the gauntlet has been laid, and hopefully once I've dropped 1.5 of my 15.8 stone, then well, I can perform live with the Dream Boys. I know what you're all thinking. Tom looks rough, doesn't he? But at the time, one of my colleagues nicknamed me Fatrick, which was very kind of them. And they also wrote this auto cue. That is me. Yes, there we go. So I actually, despite telling you all I was going to lose weight, I decided to put weight on, which, considering I was raising money for charity at the time, was not really the best thing that I could have done. But I was struggling, ladies and gentlemen. I was struggling. But GB News viewers can obviously see a photo showing why I got the name Fatrick. So I have decided to lose a bit of weight. OK, and I am doing it to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. I am delighted to say that we have now raised nearly 52 grand. So you have put another 3 grand in the kitty in the last 2.5 hours alone. Thank you so much. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. And seriously, aside from the fact that I just needed to get healthier anyway, right? I am really seriously doing it because I know that a lot of you, I'm just going to go through a couple of the donations now, are giving in wonderful amounts of, like, £5 or £2 or whatever. Like, Kirsty's just given 20 quid. A lot of people are raising money as well and giving me money because they sadly had relatives who were struggling with mental health and who took their own lives. And it weighs heavy on my mind, this, and I want to genuinely, all joking aside, I want to try and be in decent nick when I get on stage with the Dream Boys. So thank you very, very much, everybody who's donated some money so far. It's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. In a month's time, I'll be on stage. And, yes, there we go. Thank you very much. I am going to be preceded now, followed by, there you go, it's easy for me to say, by Emily Carver, who is in for Michelle Dewberry. Emily, are you OK?
I'm very well. It is heartening to see the difference between those before pictures and the after.
Yeah.
3 stone, more than 3 stone, I think.
More than 3 6. So tomorrow I will be doing a weigh-in here on this show, so we can tell how much weight I've lost. But I was gone from 15 stone 8. Anyway, we've not got long. What's coming up quickly?
We've got lots coming up, lots of heavy topics, but we're going to put a light spin on them, as I always do. So we're going to be getting stuck into Labour's latest proposals, the government's latest proposals on all sorts, from migration to housing to price caps to oil and gas. So we'll get stuck into all of that.
Lovely stuff. Emily Carver in for Jubes & Co. I will see you tomorrow at 3, and thank you, everybody, for raising 50k for Mind. Let's save some lives.
Hello, my name's Rachel Ayres, and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast, brought to you by the Met Office. So over the next few days, it'll be remaining dry and fine, with some pretty pleasant sunshine in the west, though with cooler nights too. And this is all settled weather is all due to this high pressure that's not been moving very far from the UK in recent days. But it does also mean that we've got northeasterly winds down eastern coast, so just pushing in some cloud from the North Sea, and we'll see that through this evening and overnight. So that cloud will push westwards as we go through this evening and into the early hours of Tuesday morning, into East Anglia, southeast England and parts of the Midlands. So temperatures here might not drop out of the double figures, though further north and west in clearing skies, some rural places we could see a touch of frost. So a cloudy start across some eastern areas to Tuesday morning, but that cloud is going to burn back towards the North Sea through the morning on Tuesday to leave plenty of pleasant sunny spells for northern and western areas throughout the day, always remaining cloudier further east, but there could just be some bright spells through Tuesday. And with temperatures climbing at the moment every day, we could see 24 or maybe 25 across western and central parts of Scotland. So as we go into Tuesday evening, that cloud will once again bring its way westwards from the North Sea, pushing a little further west than what we've seen of recent days. So parts of Wales and southwest England will also see some cloud into Wednesday morning. Though across Scotland and Northern Ireland, a cooler night here. We might also see the odd spot of rain and drizzle across some eastern areas to